In this video, I'll be walking you through the entire Grand Theft Auto timeline in complete chronological order, covering every major event and game in the franchise's sprawling history. We're going to be examining all 12 main entries in the series, including the original top-down games, the revolutionary 3D-era titles, and the modern HD Universe installments, but this timeline focuses on the main series games and their direct in-universe chronological placements, excluding spin-offs like Grand Theft Auto Advance or mobile ports unless they significantly alter the established canon. As always, throughout the video, there will be a timeline animation at the bottom of the screen, so you can easily follow along and understand exactly when each event takes place. You might be surprised to learn that the very first Grand Theft Auto game, despite its modern setting, actually takes place before many of the series' most iconic 3D-era titles. Without further ado, let's start with the very beginning. Before the neon-soaked streets of Vice City and the gang warfare of Los Santos, the Grand Theft Auto universe found its roots in a very different setting. To understand the full scope of this sprawling criminal saga, we need to travel back to where the timeline truly begins, not in America, but across the Atlantic in the capital of the United Kingdom. Our journey starts in 1961, then moves forward to 1969, during an era that would come to define British culture, music, and yes, organized crime. The story opens in London during the swinging 60s, a period of profound social change, cultural revolution, and beneath the surface glamour, a thriving criminal underworld. This is the setting for Grand Theft Auto, London, 1969, and its prequel expansion, London, 1961. These games, released as expansion packs to the original Grand Theft Auto, represent the franchise's first and only journey outside of the United States, offering players a chance to explore a fictionalized version of England's capital during one of its most iconic decades. In 1961, 8 years before the main events we will discuss, the foundations of London's criminal empire are already firmly established. The player takes control of a silent protagonist, a nameless criminal, whose identity remains deliberately ambiguous throughout the experience. This design choice, common in early Grand Theft Auto titles, allows players to project themselves into the role, becoming the architect of their own criminal career. The character arrives in London with nothing but ambition and a willingness to do whatever it takes to climb the ranks of the city's underworld. The London of 1961 that players explore is a carefully crafted representation of the real city, compressed and stylized to fit the technical limitations of the era while still capturing the essence of its inspiration. Iconic landmarks dot the landscape, from the Tower of London to Buckingham Palace, from Westminster Abbey to the distinctive red telephone boxes that line the streets. The game world is divided into several distinct boroughs, each with its own character and criminal opportunities. The developers have taken care to recreate the architectural style of the period, with rows of terraced houses, sprawling parks, and the Thames River cutting through the heart of the city. What makes this setting particularly fascinating is how it captures a London in transition. The early 1960s were a time when post-war austerity was finally giving way to a new prosperity, when traditional British values were beginning to clash with emerging youth culture, and when organized crime was becoming increasingly sophisticated. The game reflects this tension, presenting a city where old-fashioned gangsters in sharp suits operate alongside newer, more diverse criminal enterprises. The criminal activities available to the player character follow the established Grand Theft Auto formula, adapted to the British setting. Vehicle theft, the core mechanic that gives the series its name, takes on a distinctly British flavor. Instead of American muscle cars and sleek sports cars, players find themselves stealing classic British automobiles. Mini Coopers zip through narrow streets, double-decker buses lumber through traffic, and black taxicabs provide both transportation and cover for criminal activities. The handling of these vehicles differs from their American counterparts, requiring players to adapt their driving style to the tighter, more congested streets of London. The mission structure introduces players to various crime syndicates operating throughout the city, each with their own agenda and sphere of influence. The criminal landscape of 1961 London is diverse and competitive, with multiple organizations vying for control of territory, smuggling routes, and lucrative criminal enterprises. Players work their way up through the ranks by completing jobs for these organizations, proving their worth through increasingly dangerous and complex assignments. Among the most prominent criminal organizations are the Crisp Twins, a clear homage to the real-life Cray twins who dominated London's East End during this period. The Crisp Twins run their operations with a mixture of old-school brutality and surprising business acumen. They control protection rackets, illegal gambling operations, and have their fingers in various legitimate businesses that serve as fronts for money laundering. Working for the Crisp Twins means entering a world where reputation is everything, where showing weakness can be fatal, and where loyalty is rewarded but betrayal is met with swift and violent retribution. The missions for the Crisp Twins range from simple debt collection to more elaborate schemes involving rival gang territories. Players might be tasked with delivering packages across the city, packages whose contents are never explicitly stated but are clearly valuable and illegal. Other missions involve intimidating business owners who refuse to pay protection money, sending a message that resistance to the twins' authority will not be tolerated. As players prove themselves capable, the assignments become more significant, involving turf wars with rival gangs and the elimination of threats to the Twins' empire. Another major faction in the London underworld is the Jamaican Yardies, representing the growing Caribbean community in London and their increasing influence in organized crime. The Yardies bring a different style to the criminal landscape, operating with a more decentralized structure than traditional British gangs. Their operations focus heavily on drug trafficking, particularly marijuana, which was beginning to find a growing market among London's youth culture. The Yardies also run illegal gambling operations, particularly games popular in Caribbean communities, and engage in gun smuggling, bringing weapons into the country through their international connections. Working for the Yardies exposes players to a different side of London's criminal world. The missions often take place in areas with large immigrant populations, neighborhoods that the traditional British gangs have overlooked or dismissed. The Yardies prove to be shrewd operators, using their outsider status to their advantage, building networks that extend beyond London to other British cities and back to the Caribbean. Players might find themselves protecting drug shipments, eliminating informants who threaten to expose operations to the police, or engaging in violent confrontations with rival gangs who underestimate the Yardies' capabilities. Beyond these major organizations, players also take on work for various other criminal elements. There are independent operators, small-time crooks looking to make a name for themselves, corrupt businessmen who need dirty work done with plausible deniability, and even missions that involve the fringes of legitimate society, where the line between legal and illegal becomes deliberately blurred. This variety ensures that players experience the full spectrum of criminal activity in 1960s London, from street-level thuggery to more sophisticated white-collar crime. The Metropolitan Police, London's law enforcement agency, serve as the primary antagonists to the player's criminal activities. The police in Grand Theft Auto, London operate under a wanted level system, a mechanic that would become a defining feature of the entire franchise. As players commit crimes, their wanted level increases, represented by a series of police badges. At lower wanted levels, regular patrol officers will attempt to arrest the player, chasing on foot or in police cars. As the wanted level rises, the response becomes more aggressive. Armed response units arrive, willing to use lethal force. At the highest wanted levels, the police deploy roadblocks, coordinate their pursuit more effectively, and become relentless in their determination to bring the player to justice. Evading the Metropolitan Police requires skill, knowledge of the city's layout, and quick thinking. Players can lose their wanted level by staying out of sight, finding secluded areas where police cannot locate them, or by using special icons scattered throughout the city that instantly clear their wanted status. The narrow streets and complex road network of London provide both challenges and opportunities for escape. A player who knows the back alleys and shortcuts can often evade pursuit more easily than in an open environment, but wrong turns can lead to dead ends and capture. The shootouts that occur throughout the game reflect the era's technology and weaponry. Players have access to various firearms, from pistols and shotguns to more powerful automatic weapons. The combat is viewed from a top-down perspective, characteristic of the early Grand Theft Auto games, requiring players to aim carefully and manage their ammunition. The violence, while stylized and limited by the graphical capabilities of the time, still conveys the dangerous nature of the criminal lifestyle. Every confrontation carries risk, whether it is with rival gang members defending their territory or with police officers responding to criminal activity. As we move forward to 1969, the main setting of Grand Theft Auto, London. 1969, we find a city that has evolved significantly over 8 years. The London of 1969 is deeper into the swinging 60s, a time when the city had become the cultural capital of the world. The Beatles had conquered global music charts, fashion designers like Mary Quant had revolutionized clothing, and London had shed much of its post-war grimness to become a symbol of youth, creativity, and rebellion. But beneath this glossy surface, the criminal underworld had also evolved, becoming more organized, more violent, and more profitable. The player character in 1969, once again a silent protagonist, navigates this changed landscape. The criminal organizations have grown more powerful and more territorial. The stakes are higher, the operations more complex, and the violence more intense. The crisp twins, if they survive the events of 1961, have either consolidated their power or face new challenges from emerging rivals. The Jamaican Yardies have expanded their influence, their drug operations growing to meet increasing demand from London's counterculture movement. New criminal elements have emerged by 1969. The drug trade has exploded, with marijuana joined by LSD and other psychedelics that fuel the hippie movement. Organized crime has recognized the profit potential in this new market and fights viciously for control. The missions in 1969 reflect this evolution, with players involved in larger-scale operations, more sophisticated crimes, and conflicts that span the entire city. The simple debt collection and intimidation jobs of 1961 have given way to complex heists, major drug deals, and gang wars that threaten to spiral out of control. The vehicles available to players in 1969 also reflect the passage of time. While many classic British cars remain, newer models have appeared on the streets. The automotive industry has advanced, and players can steal faster, more powerful vehicles. The iconic imagery of 1960s Britain is everywhere, from the Mini Cooper made famous by the film The Italian Job to the classic British sports cars that represent the era's style and engineering. Double-decker buses continue to provide unique transportation options, their size and durability making them useful for everything from getaway vehicles to mobile battering rams. The fictionalized London of 1969 has also changed visually and culturally. The fashion has become more colorful and daring, with mod styles dominating the streets. Music venues and nightclubs have proliferated, becoming centers of both legitimate entertainment and criminal activity. These establishments serve as fronts for illegal operations, meeting places for criminal negotiations, and sometimes as battlegrounds when rival gangs clash. The cultural revolution happening on the surface provides perfect cover for the criminal revolution happening beneath it. Throughout both 1961 and 1969, the gameplay follows the core Grand Theft Auto principles that would define the franchise. Players have freedom to explore the city, choosing which missions to undertake and when. The open world design, though limited compared to later entries in the series, still provides a sense of agency and possibility. Between missions, players can simply drive around London, stealing cars, causing chaos, and evading police. This sandbox approach to gameplay was revolutionary at the time and laid the groundwork for everything that would follow in the series. The missions themselves vary in structure and objective. Some are straightforward, requiring players to drive from one location to another, perhaps delivering contraband or picking up associates. Others are more complex, involving multiple stages, requiring players to steal specific vehicles, eliminate targets, or survive ambushes. The difficulty escalates as players progress, with later missions demanding better driving skills, more accurate shooting, and quicker reflexes. Success brings monetary rewards, which players can use to purchase weapons and equipment, though the economy in these early games is relatively simple compared to later Grand Theft Auto titles. The narrative, such as it is, unfolds through mission briefings and the progression of increasingly dangerous assignments. While the story is not as developed or cinematic as in later Grand Theft Auto games, it still conveys the arc of a criminal career. The player character starts as a nobody, a small-time criminal willing to take on any job. Through skill, ruthlessness, and survival, they climb the ranks, becoming a trusted operative for major criminal organizations. The journey from 1961 to 1969 mirrors the evolution of organized crime itself during this period, from relatively small-scale operations to sophisticated criminal enterprises. The setting of London during the 1960s provides a unique backdrop that distinguishes these games from the rest of the Grand Theft Auto series. The British culture, architecture, and criminal underworld offer a different flavor from the American settings that would dominate future entries. The music, featuring period-appropriate British rock and pop, creates atmosphere and reinforces the time period. The dialogue, delivered with British accents and slang, adds authenticity and charm. Even the humor, with its distinctly British sensibility, sets these games apart. These London-set adventures represent an important chapter in Grand Theft Auto history, establishing that the franchise could successfully transport its core gameplay to different settings and time periods. While future games would return to American cities, the experiments with London proved that the formula was flexible and adaptable. The criminal activities, the vehicle theft, the police chases, and the mission structure all worked just as well in the narrow streets of London as they would in the sprawling highways of American cities. As our timeline begins here in the swinging 60s of London, we see the foundations being laid for everything that follows. The criminal protagonist, the open-world exploration, the mission-based progression, the wanted level system, and the freedom to cause mayhem between objectives all start here. The events of 1961 and 1969 may seem disconnected from the later American set games, but they establish the template and prove the concept. This is where the Grand Theft Auto universe begins, in the fog-shrouded streets of London, where a silent protagonist starts their journey through the criminal underworld, stealing cars, evading police, and building a reputation that will echo through the decades to come. Jumping forward from the swinging 60s of London, we land in the neon-soaked heat of 1984, where the Grand Theft Auto series makes its first chronological visit to Vice City, a fictionalized version of Miami that would become one of the franchise's most iconic locations. This is Grand Theft Auto: Vice City Stories, a prequel that sets the stage for events players wouldn't experience until later in the series' timeline, but which was actually released in 2006 for the PlayStation Portable before being ported to PlayStation 2 the following year. The story centers on Victor Vance, a U.S. Army corporal stationed at Fort Baxter, a military base on the outskirts of Vice City. Unlike many protagonists in the Grand Theft Auto universe who are already embedded in criminal life when we meet them, Vic starts as a fundamentally decent man trying to do the right thing under difficult circumstances. He's enlisted in the military specifically to support his dysfunctional family back home. His mother is a drug addict, his younger brother Pete suffers from asthma and requires expensive medical care, and his older brother Lance, who you might recognize from Grand Theft Auto: Vice City, is an impulsive hothead who refuses to hold down legitimate work. Vic's military career comes to an abrupt and humiliating end almost immediately. His commanding officer, Sergeant Jerry Martinez, is a thoroughly corrupt soldier who runs various illegal operations out of Fort Baxter. Martinez orders Vic to guard a shipment of drugs in one of the barracks and to drive a prostitute to a local hotel. Vic reluctantly complies, knowing that refusing a superior officer could have consequences, but his obedience backfires spectacularly. The operation is raided, and Martinez, covering his own tracks, pins the entire scandal on Vic. Despite his protests and his previously clean record, Victor Vance receives a dishonorable discharge from the United States Army. This discharge is the inciting incident that transforms Vic's life completely. Stripped of his military income and now bearing the stigma of a dishonorable discharge that makes legitimate employment nearly impossible, Vic finds himself stranded in Vice City with no money, no prospects, and a family that still depends on him financially. It's a classic Grand Theft Auto setup, the moment when circumstance and desperation funnel a character into the criminal underworld. But Vic's fall feels particularly tragic because of how hard he was trying to stay on the straight and narrow. With few options available, Vic reconnects with his brother Lance, who has already established himself in Vice City's criminal scene, though at a relatively low level. Lance is everything Vic isn't: flashy, reckless, overconfident, and always chasing the next big score. The brothers have a complicated relationship throughout the game. Vic is the responsible one, constantly trying to rein in Lance's worst impulses, while Lance chafes under what he perceives as his younger brother's lecturing. Despite their differences, they're family, and in the world of Grand Theft Auto, family bonds often pull characters deeper into crime, even as they claim to be trying to escape it. The brothers begin taking on work for various criminal figures around Vice City, and this is where the game introduces players to the city's underworld hierarchy in 1984, 2 years before the events of Grand Theft Auto, Vice City. One of their early employers is Phil Collins, not the famous musician, but a gun-running arms dealer who operates out of a trailer park and has a perpetual paranoia about government surveillance. Phil provides the Vance brothers with various jobs involving weapons deals and serves as a connection point to Vice City's broader criminal network. The most significant figures in Vic's early criminal career are the Mendez brothers, Diego and Armando, who essentially control Vice City's drug trade in 1984. The Mendez brothers run their empire from a compound in Vice City and represent the old guard of the city's criminal establishment. Diego is the more level-headed of the two, a calculating businessman who treats crime as a corporate enterprise. Armando, by contrast, is violent, paranoid, and increasingly unstable, prone to explosive outbursts and brutal acts of violence. The dynamic between the two brothers mirrors, in some ways, the dynamic between Vic and Lance, though taken to a much darker extreme. Initially, Vic and Lance work for the Mendez brothers, carrying out various operations that help solidify the brothers' control over Vice City's drug distribution networks. These missions take the Vance brothers across the city, from the Art Deco hotels of Ocean Beach to the industrial docks of Viceport, from the gang-controlled neighborhoods of Little Haiti to the affluent mansions of Starfish Island. Through these jobs, the game paints a picture of Vice City as a powder keg of competing interests: established crime families, up-and-coming drug dealers, corrupt police officers, and desperate street gangs, all fighting for their piece of the lucrative cocaine trade that was flooding into South Florida during the 1980s. The relationship between the Vance brothers and the Mendez brothers deteriorates over the course of the story, as it often does in Grand Theft Auto narratives. A combination of Lance's impulsiveness, the Mendez brothers' paranoia, and the high-stakes nature of the drug trade creates an increasingly volatile situation. Misunderstandings escalate into violence, and what began as a working relationship transforms into open warfare. The Mendez brothers, who once employed the Vance brothers, become their primary antagonists, and much of the game's middle section involves Vic and Lance fighting to survive against the resources of Vice City's most powerful criminal organization. This conflict forces Vic to become more than just a soldier following orders or a low-level criminal doing jobs for others. To survive and protect his family, particularly his brother Pete, who remains vulnerable throughout the story, Vic must build his own criminal empire. This is where Grand Theft Auto, Vice City Stories, introduces one of its most distinctive gameplay features, the empire building system. Empire building allows Vic to take over and operate various criminal businesses throughout Vice City. These aren't legitimate enterprises, but rather fronts for illegal operations: protection rackets, prostitution rings, drug manufacturing facilities, and smuggling operations. The system works by having players identify enemy-controlled businesses marked on the map and then engaging in a mission to seize control of them. Once captured, these businesses generate passive income for Vic, funding his operations and his family's needs. But ownership comes with responsibilities and risks. Rival gangs and criminal organizations periodically attack Vic's businesses, attempting to take them back or destroy them. When this happens, you receive a notification and must rush to defend the property, fighting off waves of attackers. Successfully defending a business maintains your income stream and your reputation, while losing one means lost revenue and a blow to your standing in the criminal underworld. This creates a dynamic element to the game where you're not just completing story missions, but actively managing and defending a growing criminal empire. The types of businesses Vic can control vary in profitability and risk. Small-time rackets like protection schemes generate modest income with relatively little heat from law enforcement, while high-value operations like drug labs produce significant revenue but attract more attention from both rival criminals and the police. The empire building system gives players a sense of progression beyond just the story missions. You're not merely working for others, you're building something, even if that something is a network of illegal enterprises. This gameplay mechanic ties directly into the game's thematic exploration of the 1980s drug trade in Vice City. The game depicts this era as a gold rush, a moment when massive amounts of money were flowing into South Florida through cocaine trafficking, and anyone ruthless and smart enough could carve out a fortune. The empire building system makes you complicit in this economy, forcing you to engage with the same businesses and practices that define the era's criminal landscape. You're not just observing the drug trade from a distance, you're participating in it, making the moral compromises that come with that participation. Throughout his rise, Vic encounters various other characters who populate Vice City's criminal ecosystem. There's Marty J. Williams, a small-time loan shark and pimp who runs a strip club and initially employs Vic for various jobs. Marty is a thoroughly unpleasant character, abusive to his wife Louise and to the women who work for him. His storyline becomes one of the game's more memorable arcs when Louise, desperate to escape her abusive marriage, begins working with Vic. The situation escalates until Vic is forced to kill Marty in self-defense, an act that has consequences throughout the rest of the game. After Marty's death, Vic takes over his businesses, including the Pole Position Club, a strip club that players of Grand Theft Auto, Vice City will recognize. This is one of many connections Vice City Stories makes to its successor, showing the origins of locations and situations that players encountered in the 2002 game. Louise and Vic develop a relationship that's part business partnership and part romantic connection, though it's complicated by Vic's criminal lifestyle and his focus on protecting his family. Another significant figure is Humberto Robina, the leader of the Los Cabrones gang, a Cuban street gang based in Little Havana. Humberto is a stereotypical macho figure, constantly trying to prove his toughness and his gang's dominance over their rivals, the Cholos and the Haitians. Vic does work for Humberto, participating in gang warfare that involves drive-by shootings, territory disputes, and violent confrontations. These missions highlight the ethnic tensions and gang violence that characterized parts of Miami during this era, though the game's satirical tone means these depictions are often exaggerated for dramatic effect. The Mendez brothers remain the primary antagonists for much of the story, and the conflict with them escalates dramatically. Armando Mendez, the more unstable of the two, becomes increasingly paranoid and violent, convinced that the Vance brothers are trying to take over his operation, which, to be fair, they essentially are by this point. Diego attempts to maintain some rationality, but even he is eventually pulled into the all-out war between the organizations. The conflict comes to a head in a series of violent confrontations. Vic and Lance systematically dismantle the Mendez brothers' operations, attacking their drug labs, their distribution networks, and their allies. The game's missions during this period are some of its most action-heavy, involving large-scale shootouts, helicopter chases, and explosive set-piece moments. The 1980s aesthetic is on full display, with the soundtrack featuring period-appropriate music, the visuals soaked in neon and pastel colors, and the overall tone capturing the excess and violence of the era. The final confrontation with the Mendez brothers is appropriately dramatic. Diego and Armando make a last stand at their compound, and Vic must fight through their remaining forces to reach them. The battle is intense and personal, the culmination of all the betrayals and violence that have defined their relationship. Ultimately, Vic kills both Mendez brothers, eliminating Vice City's most powerful criminal organization and positioning himself and Lance as major players in the city's underworld. But victory comes at a terrible cost, as it so often does in Grand Theft Auto stories. Throughout the game, Vic has been trying to protect his younger brother Pete, keeping him away from the violence and crime. Despite Vic's best efforts, Pete becomes a casualty of the criminal lifestyle. In one of the game's most emotionally impactful moments, Pete is killed, a victim of the very world Vic entered to try to provide for his family. Pete's death is the tragedy at the heart of Vic's story, the moment when the consequences of his choices become undeniable. The game ends with Vic and Lance standing atop Vice City's criminal hierarchy, having defeated the Mendez brothers and established themselves as major figures in the drug trade. They've achieved wealth and power, but at the cost of their brother's life and their own humanity. Vic is exhausted and disillusioned, having lost the person he was trying to protect. Lance, by contrast, seems energized by their success, already thinking about their next moves and bigger scores. This ending sets up the events of Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, perfectly. Players who have experienced that game know what happens next. In 1986, just 2 years after the events of Vice City Stories, Vic and Lance will be involved in a drug deal that goes catastrophically wrong, the deal that opens Grand Theft Auto, Vice City. Vic will be killed in that deal, and Lance will survive to become a major character in Tommy Vercetti's story. Knowing this fate adds a layer of tragedy to Vice City Stories. We're watching Vic build an empire and fight to protect his family, but players familiar with the series know that his story ends badly. that all his struggles and sacrifices ultimately lead to his death in a parking lot during a botched cocaine deal. Grand Theft Auto: Vice City Stories is significant in the franchise timeline because it expands our understanding of Vice City as a location and as a character in its own right. The city in 1984 is slightly different from the city in 1986, still developing, with some areas under construction and the criminal landscape not yet fully formed. The game shows us the power vacuum and the violent competition that defined the early 1980s drug trade, the chaos out of which the more established criminal order of 1986 would emerge. The game also represents Rockstar's continued experimentation with the prequel format, following Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas' exploration of early 1990s Los Santos, and Grand Theft Auto: Liberty City Stories' depiction of 1998 Liberty City. By going back in time, these games add depth to the series' fictional universe, showing how locations and characters evolved, how criminal empires rose and fell, and how the actions of one generation of criminals set the stage for the next. Victor Vance himself is one of the more sympathetic protagonists in the Grand Theft Auto series. Unlike characters who embrace criminality or who are already deeply embedded in that world when we meet them, Vic is someone who genuinely tried to do the right thing and was forced into crime by circumstance and bad luck. His story is a tragedy in the classical sense, a tale of a good man brought down by forces beyond his control and by the flaws of those around him. The fact that players familiar with the series know his ultimate fate makes his journey in Vice City Stories all the more poignant. We're watching a man fight desperately to protect his family and build a future, knowing that he has no future, that his story ends in violence just 2 years down the timeline. 2 years after Victor Vance's death in that ill-fated drug deal, the reverberations of that botched transaction would fundamentally reshape Vice City's criminal landscape. In 1986, at the height of Miami vice glamour and excess, a new player arrives in Vice City, one whose ambitions would dwarf anything the Vance brothers had attempted. Tommy Vercetti steps off a helicopter into the neon-soaked paradise of Vice City, but this is no vacation. Tommy is a made man, a soldier in the Forelli crime family based out of Liberty City, and he carries with him a reputation forged in blood. 15 years earlier, Tommy had been sent to kill one man in Harwood, but ended up massacring 11. The hit was supposed to be a setup orchestrated by Sonny Forelli himself, designed to eliminate Tommy while he was still a young hothead. Instead, Tommy survived the ambush and killed everyone sent to take him down. He went to prison for the murders, and here's the crucial part: he kept his mouth shut. For 15 years, Tommy Vercetti did his time without once considering becoming an informant, a quality that earns respect in the world of organized crime, but also makes you a liability to bosses who tried to have you killed. Now, in 1986, Tommy is finally out, and Sonny Forelli needs to get him out of Liberty City. Tommy's return makes people nervous, stirs up old questions, and Sonny can't simply eliminate a made man who did his time honorably. The solution is to send Tommy south to Vice City with money and instructions to establish a new operation for the Forelli family. The plan is straightforward. Tommy will meet with the Forelli family's local contact, lawyer Ken Rosenberg, complete a cocaine deal with the Vance crime family, and begin setting up a drug distribution network that will funnel profits back to Liberty City. It's meant to be a simple transaction, a way to get Tommy productively out of the way while expanding Forelli interests into new territory. The deal goes catastrophically wrong. Tommy, Ken Rosenberg, and Ken's associate Lance Vance meet at the docks to exchange Forelli money for Vance cocaine. Before the transaction can complete, armed men ambush the meet. In the chaos, multiple people die, including Lance's brother Victor Vance, the same Victor who had been building his own empire just 2 years prior. The cocaine disappears. The Forelli money disappears. Tommy barely escapes with his life, and now he's in Vice City with no product, no money, and a very angry mob boss expecting results. Ken Rosenberg is panicking. He's a nervous, cocaine-addicted lawyer who suddenly finds himself in the middle of a disaster that could get him killed. Tommy, by contrast, is ice cold. Prison hardened him, and he understands that panic accomplishes nothing. His first priority is figuring out who set up the ambush and recovering either the money or the drugs, preferably both. His second priority is making sure Sonny Forelli doesn't send people to Vice City to kill everyone involved in this mess. To accomplish any of this, Tommy needs to establish himself in Vice City's criminal underworld, and he needs to do it fast. Lance Vance, Victor's younger brother, is equally motivated to find out who killed Victor and stole the cocaine. Lance is flashy where Victor was pragmatic, impulsive where his brother was calculating, but he's driven by genuine grief and rage over Victor's murder. He approaches Tommy, and despite their rocky introduction at the botched deal, the two men recognize that they want the same thing. An uneasy partnership forms. Lance has connections in Vice City and knowledge of the local players. Tommy has experience, discipline, and the backing, however tenuous, of a Liberty City crime family. Together, they begin working their way through Vice City's criminal ecosystem, looking for answers and building power. Ken Rosenberg, despite his anxiety and substance abuse problems, proves useful in his own way. He's connected to legitimate businesses that can serve as fronts. He understands the legal mechanisms that allow criminals to operate openly, and he's desperate enough to be loyal. Through Ken, Tommy meets Colonel Juan Cortez, a former Venezuelan colonel living in exile who moves in Vice City's upper criminal circles. Cortez is sophisticated, cultured, and deeply connected. He knows everyone worth knowing in Vice City's underworld, and he takes a liking to Tommy's professionalism. Cortez becomes something of a mentor, providing Tommy with contacts and opportunities while also using Tommy's skills for his own purposes. Through Cortez, Tommy's world expands rapidly. He meets Ricardo Diaz, a short-tempered drug baron who controls significant cocaine distribution in Vice City. Diaz is volatile and paranoid, constantly worried about threats to his empire, and he begins hiring Tommy for increasingly important jobs. Tommy also encounters Avery Carrington, a crooked real estate developer who sees Vice City as a canvas for profit and has no qualms about using violence and intimidation to acquire properties. Avery represents the legitimate face of Vice City corruption, the way criminal money gets laundered through construction projects and property deals. Then there's Humberto Robina, who runs a Cuban gang from Little Havana, and Auntie Pule, a Haitian gang leader involved in voodoo practices. Vice City in 1986 is a powder keg of competing interests, with Cuban and Haitian gangs fighting for territory, biker gangs like the Big Mitch Baker's crew controlling their own turf, and various criminal entrepreneurs all trying to carve out their piece of the cocaine trade. As Tommy works for these various figures, he's simultaneously investigating the ambush. The trail leads in multiple directions, and Vice City's criminal landscape is deliberately opaque, with everyone lying to everyone else as a matter of course. Tommy takes on jobs for Diaz, jobs that seem designed to test his loyalty and capability. He works for the Cubans against the Haitians, then takes jobs from the Haitians, playing both sides while gathering information and building his own reputation. He helps Avery Carrington with real estate acquisitions that involve chasing off current owners through violence and intimidation. He earns the respect of the biker gangs by proving himself in various challenges. Each job, each connection, each favor owed brings Tommy deeper into Vice City's underworld while also building the foundation for his own power base. Lance Vance is with him through much of this, the two men functioning as partners in their investigation and their growing criminal enterprise. But Lance's impulsiveness creates friction. Where Tommy is patient and strategic, Lance wants immediate results and immediate respect. He's flashy, spending money on clothes and cars, trying to look the part of a major player before he's actually built the substance to back it up. Tommy recognizes the warning signs but needs Lance's local knowledge and connections, so the partnership continues despite growing tensions. The truth about the ambush eventually emerges. Ricardo Diaz, the paranoid drug lord Tommy has been working for, was behind the attack. Diaz wanted to steal the cocaine and the money, eliminating potential competition while enriching himself. He's been playing Tommy all along, using him for various jobs while knowing full well that Tommy was searching for the person who set up the ambush. It's a dangerous game Diaz has been playing, and when Tommy and Lance discover the truth, they make a calculated decision. Rather than seek revenge immediately, they continue working for Diaz, getting closer to him, learning the details of his operation, and waiting for the right moment to strike. When that moment comes, Tommy and Lance move decisively. They attack Diaz's mansion, fighting through his security forces in a prolonged gun battle that leaves Diaz dead and his organization leaderless. With Diaz eliminated, Tommy doesn't just take revenge for the ambush. He takes everything. Diaz's mansion becomes Tommy's mansion. Diaz's drug operations become Tommy's operations. Diaz's distribution networks, his contacts, his territory, all of it transfers to Tommy Vercetti. In one violent night, Tommy goes from being a soldier sent to Vice City to establish a small operation to being one of the major criminal powers in the city. But taking Diaz's empire creates new problems as quickly as it solves old ones. Sonny Forelli, back in Liberty City, hears about Tommy's success and decides it's time to collect. Sonny sees Tommy's growing empire as Forelli family property, built with Forelli money, even though that money was lost in the original ambush and everything Tommy built afterward came from his own initiative and risk. Sonny comes to Vice City with his men, expecting Tommy to hand over control and accept a subordinate position in his own organization. Tommy refuses. This is the moment where everything Tommy has built is at risk, but it's also the moment where his true ambitions become clear. He didn't survive 15 years in prison and build an empire in Vice City just to hand it over to the man who tried to have him killed decades earlier. Tommy has outgrown the Forelli family. He's no longer a soldier following orders, he's become a boss in his own right, and he's willing to go to war with his former family to keep what he's built. The betrayal is multifaceted and devastating. Lance Vance, Tommy's partner throughout his rise, has been secretly talking to Sonny Forelli. Lance feels underappreciated and disrespected by Tommy, his impulsiveness and need for validation finally overwhelming his loyalty. When Sonny moves against Tommy, Lance sides with the Forellis, believing they'll give him the recognition Tommy never did. It's a miscalculation born of Lance's insecurity and short-sightedness, but it makes the final confrontation even more dangerous for Tommy. The climactic battle takes place at Tommy's mansion, the same property he took from Ricardo Diaz. Sonny Forelli arrives with his men and with Lance Vance, expecting to overwhelm Tommy and take control of the Vice City operation by force. What follows is a sustained gun battle throughout the mansion, with Tommy fighting off waves of Forelli's soldiers while also dealing with Lance's betrayal. It's the culmination of everything that's been building since Tommy arrived in Vice City. All the relationships he's built, all the territory he's claimed, all the power he's accumulated, it all comes down to this single violent confrontation. Tommy kills Lance Vance on the mansion's upper floor, eliminating his former partner turned traitor. Then, he kills Sonny Forelli, shooting down the man who tried to have him killed 15 years earlier and who tried to take his empire. With Sonny dead, the Forelli family's claim on Vice City dies with him. Tommy Vercetti is no longer affiliated with the Liberty City mob families. He's independent, a criminal power unto himself, controlling Vice City's drug trade, its protection rackets, its prostitution rings, and its various legitimate business fronts. By the end of 1986, Tommy Vercetti stands as the undisputed criminal kingpin of Vice City. He owns the Malibu Club, providing him with a legitimate entertainment venue and a front for money laundering. He controls the print works, allowing him to produce counterfeit money. He runs the Cherry Popper Ice Cream Company, a distribution network for drugs disguised as an innocent business. He owns the Kaufman Cabs Taxi Company, giving him eyes and ears throughout the city. He controls the Interglobal Film Studio, laundering money through movie production. He even owns the Vice City Malibu Strip Club and various other properties throughout the city. Each business serves dual purposes, generating legitimate income while also facilitating criminal activity. Ken Rosenberg remains as Tommy's lawyer and consigliere, his nervous energy channeled into managing the legal aspects of Tommy's empire. The various gang leaders Tommy worked with during his rise, the Cubans, the bikers, and others, they all recognize Tommy's supremacy and either work with him or stay out of his way. Tommy has accomplished what Victor Vance was building toward and what Ricardo Diaz thought he had secured. He's created a criminal empire that dominates Vice City completely. The story of Tommy Vercetti's rise is a story of ambition realized through violence and betrayal. He arrived in Vice City as a soldier following orders, a man whose best years seemed to be behind him after 15 years in prison. Within months, through a combination of strategic thinking, ruthless violence, and opportunistic empire building, he transformed himself into one of the most powerful criminals in the Grand Theft Auto universe. His success came at tremendous cost, requiring him to betray his former crime family and kill his partner. But in the world of Grand Theft Auto, loyalty is always conditional, and power is the only currency that truly matters. Vice City in 1986, under Tommy Vercetti's control, represents organized crime at its most successful. The neon-soaked streets, the pastel suits, the cocaine-fueled excess of the era, all of it flows through Tommy's empire. He's achieved what every criminal in this world dreams of: complete control of a major city's underworld, enough legitimate business fronts to appear respectable, and enough muscle to defend it all from anyone who might try to take it away. 6 years after Tommy Vercetti carved out his empire in Vice City, the story shifts back to the West Coast. It's 1992, and Los Santos, the sprawling metropolis in the state of San Andreas, has become a powder keg of gang violence, police corruption, and social decay. This is where we meet Carl Johnson, better known as CJ, a young man who left Los Santos 5 years earlier to escape the gang life and start fresh in Liberty City. But the past has a way of pulling you back, and CJ's return home sets in motion one of the most ambitious criminal sagas in the Grand Theft Auto universe. CJ's homecoming is anything but celebratory. He's back because his mother, Beverly Johnson, has been murdered in a drive-by shooting. The moment his plane touches down, things go wrong. Two corrupt police officers, Frank Tenpenny and Eddie Pulaski, members of the Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums Unit, or CRASH, pull CJ over. These aren't your typical dirty cops. They're actively involved in the drug trade, extortion, and murder, using their badges as cover for criminal enterprise. Tenpenny makes it clear that CJ is now under their thumb. They frame him for the murder of another police officer and threaten to pin it on him unless he cooperates. They dump CJ in rival gang territory, forcing him to walk back to his old neighborhood in Ganton, a subsection of Los Santos controlled by the Grove Street families. The Grove Street families, often just called Grove Street or GSF, is the gang CJ grew up in. It's an African-American street gang represented by the color green, based in the Ganton and Willowfield areas of Los Santos. But when CJ arrives at his childhood home on Grove Street, he finds everything has fallen apart. His brother Sean, known as Sweet, is struggling to hold the gang together. Their sister Kendall is dating a member of a Hispanic gang, the Varios Los Aztecas, which Sweet disapproves of. And their other brother, Brian, died years ago under circumstances that still haunt the family. Sweet blames CJ for leaving, for not being there when the family needed him most. The Grove Street families are losing ground to their primary rivals, the Ballas. The Ballas are another African-American gang, but they wear purple and have grown powerful by flooding the streets with crack cocaine. Where Grove Street once stood for keeping drugs out of the neighborhood, the Ballas have embraced the drug trade and used the profits to expand their territory. Adding to Grove Street's problems are the Los Santos Vagos, a Hispanic gang that also deals drugs and has been encroaching on GSF turf. The balance of power in Los Santos has shifted dramatically, and Grove Street is on the verge of being wiped out entirely. CJ begins working with Sweet to rebuild the gang's reputation and reclaim their territory. This means recruiting new members, taking back neighborhoods through violent confrontations, and hitting the balas where it hurts. You participate in drive-bys, defend territory from attacks, and gradually push back against the rival gangs. But there's a deeper problem. Someone within Grove Street's extended circle is working against them. CJ's old friend Big Smoke, a large, charismatic member of the families, and Ryder, another childhood friend, both seem committed to the cause, but something feels off about their behavior. The gang warfare intensifies, and CJ proves himself capable and loyal. He reconnects with other old friends, including Cesar Villalpando, Kendall's boyfriend and a member of the Varios Los Aztecas. Despite Sweet's initial hostility toward their relationship, Cesar proves to be trustworthy and becomes one of CJ's most reliable allies. Cesar tips CJ off to something shocking. He tells him to watch a meeting that's about to take place, and when CJ stakes it out, he sees Big Smoke and Ryder meeting with the Balas and the Los Santos Vagos. They're the traitors. They've been working with the rival gangs all along, sabotaging Grove Street from within. Before CJ can act on this information, everything explodes. Sweet organizes a major attack on Balas territory to end the war once and for all. But it's a setup. The Balas are waiting, and Sweet is shot. As CJ rushes to defend his brother, Crash officers Tenpenny and Pulaski arrive. Instead of helping, they arrest CJ and Sweet. They take CJ out to the countryside and dump him in Whetstone, a rural area far from Los Santos. Tenpenny makes it clear that CJ will continue to work for him, doing jobs that keep Tenpenny's criminal enterprises running smoothly. Sweet, meanwhile, is sent to prison. And with both Johnson brothers out of the picture, the Balas and their allies take over Grove Street completely. Everything CJ worked to rebuild is lost. Stranded in the countryside with nothing, CJ makes his way to Angel Pine, a small town in Whetstone. Here, he reconnects with an old acquaintance, The Truth, an aging hippie and cannabis enthusiast who speaks in mystical, philosophical terms, but is surprisingly well-connected in the criminal underworld. The Truth becomes a mentor figure of sorts, introducing CJ to new opportunities and a different perspective on the criminal world. Through The Truth, CJ begins working with the Loco Syndicate, a drug manufacturing and distribution operation based in San Fierro, the second major city in San Andreas. San Fierro is a stark contrast to Los Santos. Located in the northern part of the state, it's a hilly, foggy city with a more bohemian atmosphere, clearly inspired by San Francisco. Here, CJ reunites with Cesar and Kendall, who have also fled Los Santos. Together, they establish a base of operations in a rundown garage in the Doherty district. CJ begins working to infiltrate the Loco Syndicate, which is connected to the Balas' drug operations and, by extension, to Big Smoke and Ryder. The syndicate is run by Mike Torino, a mysterious figure who seems to have resources and knowledge far beyond a typical drug dealer, and Jizzy B, a pimp who operates out of a nightclub under the Gant Bridge. To get close to the syndicate, CJ takes jobs from Jizzy, doing everything from protecting his prostitutes to eliminating rivals. He works his way up the organization, eventually meeting T-Bone Mendez, the syndicate's muscle, and finally participating in a major drug deal. But CJ's goal isn't to join the syndicate, it's to destroy it. With Caesar's help, he systematically dismantles the operation. They kill Jizzy, eliminate T-Bone, and raid a drug factory. During the final confrontation, CJ discovers that Ryder has been in San Fierro working with the syndicate. He kills his former friend, eliminating another traitor. With the Loco Syndicate destroyed, CJ focuses on legitimate business. He and Caesar turn the Doherty garage into a successful chop shop and car theft operation, working with a skilled mechanic named Dwayne and a DJ named Mad Dog's former manager. But CJ's work for Tenpenny isn't finished. He's contacted by Mike Torino, who, it turns out, isn't just a drug dealer. Torino is a government agent working for an unnamed agency that operates outside normal legal boundaries. He reveals that he's been manipulating events from behind the scenes and that he has the power to help Sweet. In exchange for CJ's continued service, running dangerous missions that serve Torino's agency's interests, Torino promises to get Sweet released from prison. CJ has no choice but to agree. Torino sends him on increasingly bizarre and dangerous missions, from destroying drug fields in rural areas to stealing military equipment. These jobs take CJ all over San Andreas, including back to the countryside and eventually to the desert region surrounding Las Venturas, the third major city in the state. Las Venturas is San Andreas' gambling capital, a glittering desert metropolis inspired by Las Vegas, filled with casinos, organized crime, and opportunities for those willing to take risks. In Las Venturas, CJ encounters a new cast of characters. He begins working with the Triad crime families, specifically Woodsy Moo, known as Woozy, a blind but highly capable Triad leader who runs operations out of the Four Dragons Casino. Woozy and CJ develop a genuine friendship, something rare in CJ's world of betrayal and self-interest. Through Woozy, CJ becomes involved in the casino business and helps the Triads compete against the mafia-controlled casinos on the Strip. He also crosses paths with rapper Mad Dog, whose career has been destroyed by CJ's earlier actions working for a crooked music producer. Feeling guilty, CJ saves Mad Dog from suicide and becomes his manager, helping him rebuild his career. But the most significant development in Las Venturas is the discovery of Big Smoke's operation. CJ learns that his former friend has become a major drug lord, operating out of Los Santos and working directly with Tenpenny and the Ballas. Big Smoke has grown powerful and paranoid, running his empire from a fortified crack palace. CJ realizes that to truly finish what he started, he needs to return to Los Santos and end Big Smoke's reign. True to his word, Terreno arranges for Sweet's release from prison. When CJ picks up his brother, Sweet is hardened by his time inside and immediately wants to return to Grove Street and reclaim what was taken from them. He's disappointed to find that CJ has been focused on business ventures in San Fierro and Las Venturas, rather than rebuilding the families. Sweet sees this as another betrayal, another example of CJ abandoning the hood, but CJ convinces him that everything he's done has been to build the resources and connections they need to take back Los Santos properly. The Johnson brothers return to their old neighborhood and begin the long process of reclaiming territory. They recruit new members, win back streets through gang warfare, and slowly push the Ballas back. The old Grove Street families begin to reform. But there's still the matter of Tenpenny. The corrupt cop's crimes have finally caught up with him, and he's put on trial. However, due to lack of evidence and intimidated witnesses, Tenpenny is acquitted of all charges. The verdict sparks riots across Los Santos. The city erupts in violence, with citizens attacking police, looting stores, and setting fires. It's chaos on a massive scale, and in the midst of it, CJ makes his final moves. He launches an assault on Big Smoke's crack palace, fighting through dozens of armed guards and gang members. The fortress is a maze of drug labs and defenses, but CJ pushes through. At the top, he confronts Big Smoke, who has become a shadow of his former self, paranoid and consumed by his own product. In the ensuing gunfight, CJ kills Big Smoke. As Smoke dies, he expresses regret, but it's too late for redemption. Immediately after, Tenpenny appears. He's been using Smoke's operation for his own profit, and now he plans to take the money and run. Before CJ can stop him, Tenpenny escapes. A wild chase ensues through the burning streets of Los Santos. Sweet manages to leap onto the fire truck Tenpenny is driving, and CJ follows in a car, protecting his brother as Tenpenny tries to shake him off. The chase goes through all of Los Santos, past familiar landmarks now engulfed in flames and riots. Finally, Tenpenny loses control of the vehicle. The fire truck crashes and tumbles through the streets, eventually coming to rest on Grove Street itself, right in front of the Johnson family home. CJ, Sweet, and their friends and family gather around as Tenpenny crawls from the wreckage. He's mortally wounded, dying from injuries sustained in the crash. In his final moments, Tenpenny remains defiant, refusing to show remorse for his actions. Then, he dies, and with him, the corrupt system that's been manipulating CJ throughout his journey comes to an end. The riots begin to subside. Grove Street is back in the hands of the families. CJ has businesses across San Andreas, powerful allies, and his family together again. As everyone gathers at the Johnson house discussing their future, Mad Dog announces his comeback album is going to be huge. Caesar and Kendall talk about their plans. Sweet insists they need to stay focused on the neighborhood, on keeping Grove Street strong. CJ agrees, but you can see he's changed. He's no longer just a street gang member. He's built an empire that spans the entire state of San Andreas. He's gone from a reluctant returnee to one of the most powerful figures in the criminal underworld, and he's done it while staying true to his family and his roots. The year is still 1992, and Carl Johnson has secured his legacy in the criminal history of San Andreas. Jumping back in time once more, we arrive in the year 1997, the heart of the 90s, where the Grand Theft Auto saga truly begins in its original form. This is where it all started, the genesis of a franchise that would go on to define open-world gaming for generations to come. Before the cinematic storytelling of the three-dimensional era, before the sprawling, detailed landscapes we know today, there was a top-down perspective, a gritty, pixelated world, and a simple but revolutionary concept. You are a criminal, and the entire city is your playground. The original Grand Theft Auto introduces us to a silent protagonist, a nameless criminal whose identity shifts depending on which character model the player selects at the start of each city. Unlike the defined personalities of Claude, Tommy Vercetti, or Carl Johnson that would come later, this protagonist has no voice, no backstory, no family ties, or personal vendettas driving their actions. They exist purely as a vessel for the player's criminal ambitions, a blank slate upon which a career of escalating lawlessness can be written. This design choice, born partly from technical limitations of the era, actually serves the game's anarchic spirit perfectly. You are not playing through someone else's story. You are simply a criminal, rising through the ranks, and the story is whatever chaos you create. The game unfolds across 3 distinct locations, each a fictional reimagining of an American city that would become iconic to the series. First is Liberty City, the series analog for New York, presented here in its original universe incarnation. Unlike the detailed boroughs and recognizable landmarks of later versions, this Liberty City is a sprawling maze of streets viewed from directly overhead, a dense urban environment where police cars are just blue and white pixels, and pedestrians scatter like ants when you mount the sidewalk. The city is divided into distinct districts, each controlled by different criminal organizations, and your job is to navigate this underworld, taking contracts from whoever will pay. Next comes San Andreas, though this version bears little resemblance to the state we explored in 1992. Here, San Andreas is presented as a single city rather than a collection of 3 metropolitan areas. It is the series' first take on San Francisco, complete with steep hills, trolley cars, and a distinct geography that makes it feel different from Liberty City's grid-like layout. The San Andreas of 1997 exists in a separate continuity from the San Andreas we visited earlier in this timeline, a parallel universe version where the cities share names but not histories. This is an important distinction in understanding Grand Theft Auto's mythology. The games before Grand Theft Auto 3 exist in what fans and developers call the two-dimensional universe, a separate canon from the three-dimensional universe that begins with Grand Theft Auto 3, and later, the high-definition universe that starts with Grand Theft Auto 4. The third city is Vice City, making its debut appearance in the franchise. This Miami-inspired metropolis brings a different flavor to the criminal proceedings, with its Art Deco architecture rendered in simple geometric shapes, its beaches represented by strips of yellow pixels along the blue ocean, and a color palette that suggests the neon-soaked aesthetic that would be fully realized in the 2002 game set in 1986. Even in this primitive form, Vice City establishes itself as the series' playground for excess, a city where the crimes feel more colorful, more outrageous, more in keeping with the decade's popular crime fiction. The gameplay loop that would define the entire series begins here in 1997. You start small, a nobody in a city full of dangerous people, and you build your reputation one mission at a time. The core mechanic that gives the series its name is, of course, carjacking. You approach any vehicle on the street, press a button, and yank the driver out, claiming their car as your own. It is a simple system, but revolutionary for its time. Most games gave you a predetermined vehicle or made you earn specific cars through progression. Grand Theft Auto says every car in the city is potentially yours. You just have to take it. This creates an immediate sense of freedom and power. The city is not just a backdrop. It is a resource. Every vehicle is a tool. Every street a potential escape route. Every alley a place to hide from the law. The missions you undertake for various crime bosses form the structure of your criminal career. You receive jobs via payphones scattered throughout the cities, a delightfully 90s touch that grounds the game in its era. The phone rings, you answer, a crime boss gives you instructions, and you set out to complete the task. These missions cover the full spectrum of criminal activity. Assassinations send you across the city to eliminate specific targets, testing your ability to navigate traffic, evade police, and execute your victim before they can escape. Bank robberies require you to hit a location, grab the money, and make it to a safe house before law enforcement overwhelms you. Drug trafficking missions have you picking up illegal substances and delivering them to buyers, often while rival gangs try to intercept you. The variety in mission types keeps the gameplay from becoming repetitive, though the top-down perspective and relatively simple artificial intelligence mean that most missions ultimately come down to driving to a location, causing some form of mayhem, and escaping. What makes it compelling is the systemic chaos that emerges from the game's wanted level system, another franchise staple that debuts here. Commit a minor crime and you earn 1 police badge on your wanted meter. The cops will chase you, but they are not particularly aggressive. Cause more mayhem, run over pedestrians, shoot at officers, and your wanted level escalates. More police cars join the pursuit. At higher wanted levels, SWAT teams appear, then the FBI, and finally the military, each escalation bringing more aggressive tactics and heavier firepower. This wanted system creates emergent storytelling, moments where a simple mission spirals into a desperate cross-city chase. You might start with a straightforward assassination, but accidentally hit a police car during your escape. Suddenly, you're fleeing from a dozen cops, weaving through traffic, taking corners at high speed, trying to reach a safe zone where your wanted level will clear. These moments, unscripted and unique to each playthrough, give the game a dynamic quality that was rare in 1997. You are not just following a predetermined path. You are improvising, reacting, surviving. The crime bosses you work for represent different factions within each city's underworld. In Liberty City, you might take jobs from the mafia, traditional organized crime with a focus on protection rackets and territorial control. Other bosses represent street gangs, corrupt corporations, or independent operators, each offering missions that reflect their particular criminal specialty. The game does not develop these characters in any depth. They exist as voices on a phone, names attached to mission sets, but they establish the template for how Grand Theft Auto structures its criminal narratives. You're always working for someone, climbing a ladder, proving yourself worthy of bigger jobs and better pay. San Andreas introduces its own cast of criminal employers, with missions that take advantage of the city's unique geography. The steep hills create opportunities for spectacular chases, with cars catching air as they crest ridges and slam back down onto the pavement. Vice City's bosses lean into the more flamboyant side of crime, with missions that feel pulled from Miami Vice and Scarface, the cultural touchstones that would be more explicitly referenced in later games. The money you earn from missions serves multiple purposes. You need it to pay for certain vehicles, to bribe officials, and to unlock new areas of the map. The game gates progress through a simple but effective system. Each city is divided into sections, and some sections are initially inaccessible, either blocked by police presence or simply locked until you have achieved a certain score multiplier. This multiplier is the game's primary progression metric. Complete missions cause destruction, and your multiplier increases. Reach specific multiplier thresholds and new areas open up, along with more dangerous and lucrative missions. This score-based progression reflects the game's arcade roots. Grand Theft Auto was designed to be replayed, to encourage players to find more efficient routes, to cause more chaos, to climb leaderboards. It is not about experiencing a linear story. It is about mastering a system, learning the layout of each city, discovering which cars are fastest, which weapons are most effective, which escape routes are most reliable. In this way, the original Grand Theft Auto has more in common with classic arcade games than with the narrative-driven experiences the series would later become. The game's visual presentation, viewed from directly above with simple sprite-based graphics, might seem primitive by modern standards, but it serves the gameplay well. The top-down perspective gives you a clear view of your surroundings, allowing you to spot police cars approaching from side streets, to plan escape routes, to see pedestrians in your path. The simplicity of the graphics means the game can fill the screen with cars, pedestrians, and chaos without the technical limitations of the time causing everything to grind to a halt. There is a purity to this presentation, a clarity that later three-dimensional games would sometimes sacrifice in pursuit of realism. The audio design contributes significantly to the game's atmosphere. Each city has its own radio stations, an early version of the elaborate licensed soundtracks that would become a series hallmark. The stations play a mix of original compositions and licensed tracks, creating a sonic identity for each location. The sound effects, from the screech of tires to the crunch of collisions to the pop of gunfire, are simple but effective, giving feedback that helps you understand what is happening in the chaotic on-screen action. What truly sets Grand Theft Auto apart in 1997 is its attitude, its willingness to embrace the player's worst impulses and build a game around them. Other games of the era might include violence as a means to an end, a way to defeat enemies and progress through levels. Grand Theft Auto makes violence, theft, and chaos the point. It does not judge you for running over pedestrians. It gives you points. It does not punish you for stealing cars. It is the core mechanic. This transgressive quality, this refusal to moralize or limit the player's criminal behavior, generated significant controversy upon release and would become a defining characteristic of the franchise. The game's structure, with its 3 cities and multiple crime bosses, provides substantial content for players to work through. Each city takes hours to fully explore and complete, and the increasing difficulty as you progress ensures that the game remains challenging throughout. The later missions require not just familiarity with the cities, but genuine skill in driving, shooting, and evading police. The game respects the player's time by allowing them to save progress, but it also demands mastery, refusing to hold your hand or offer easy solutions. In establishing the original universe's versions of Liberty City, San Andreas, and Vice City, this 1997 game creates a foundation that would be both honored and completely reimagined in later entries. These cities, simple as they appear here, contain the DNA of their future incarnations. Liberty City's dense urban grid, San Andreas's hills and geography, Vice City's coastal excess, all of these elements would be expanded, detailed, and brought to life in 3 dimensions. But they start here as collections of pixels and simple geometry. The silent protagonist, the mission-based structure, the wanted level system, the freedom to steal any vehicle, the multiple cities, the criminal career progression, all of the core elements that define Grand Theft Auto are present in this original game. It is rough around the edges, limited by the technology of its time, but the vision is clear. This is a game about freedom, about giving players a city and letting them run wild, about creating systems that generate stories rather than simply presenting predetermined narratives. As 1997 draws to a close and players across the world are causing mayhem in these 3 cities, the foundation has been laid for something much bigger. The concept is proven. The mechanics work. The appetite for this kind of open-world criminal sandbox is evident. What comes next will refine these ideas, will add dimension and depth and detail, but it all starts here, in the top-down chaos of the original Grand Theft Auto, where a nameless criminal embarks on a spree across 3 cities and establishes a legacy that will span decades. Following the chaos of the late 1960s, the Grand Theft Auto timeline takes an unusual leap forward, though exactly how far forward remains deliberately unclear. Grand Theft Auto 2 places us in what the game cryptically describes as either 1999 or, more enigmatically, 3 weeks into the future. This ambiguous temporal setting gives the entire experience a retro-futuristic quality, a vision of tomorrow imagined through the lens of yesterday. The year 1999 itself was seen during the game's development as the near future, a time when society might have evolved in unexpected directions. This deliberate vagueness about when exactly the story takes place becomes part of the game's identity, separating it further from the reality-grounded settings of other entries in the series. In this uncertain future, we follow Claude Speed, a silent protagonist whose name would echo through the franchise in interesting ways. Unlike the previous game's multiple playable characters across different cities, Grand Theft Auto 2 focuses entirely on this single criminal operator. Claude Speed never speaks throughout his entire adventure, establishing a template that would later be refined in Grand Theft Auto 3. He is defined purely by his actions, a blank slate onto which players project their own criminal ambitions. What we know of Claude Speed comes not from dialogue or cutscenes, but from the missions he accepts and the chaos he creates across the urban landscape. The setting for his criminal enterprise is Anywhere City, a name that perfectly captures the game's abstract approach to location. Unlike Liberty City's clear inspiration from New York or Vice City's obvious Miami roots, Anywhere City is deliberately generic, a metropolis that could theoretically exist in any location. This nameless quality reinforces the game's detachment from the real-world geography that anchored the first game and would later define the 3D universe titles. Anywhere City exists in a space between reality and fiction, a place that feels simultaneously familiar and alien. The city itself is divided into 3 distinct districts, each with its own character and criminal ecosystem. Downtown serves as the commercial and business heart of Anywhere City, a place of tall buildings, corporate power, and organized crime syndicates fighting for control of lucrative territory. The architecture here reflects the retro-futuristic aesthetic, with structures that feel both contemporary and oddly dated, as if the future arrived but brought with it the design sensibilities of decades past. Neon signs advertise businesses with darkly comic names, and the streets pulse with the energy of competing criminal factions. The residential district offers a different flavor of urban decay. Here, the focus shifts to the neighborhoods where Anywhere City's population actually lives, though calling these areas residential hardly suggests suburban tranquility. Gang warfare spills across apartment complexes and housing projects. The streets are narrower, more intimate, creating a different tactical challenge for the criminal activities Claude Speed undertakes. This is where territorial disputes become personal, where the various gangs maintain their strongholds and recruit their foot soldiers from the local population. Finally, the industrial district represents the working heart of the city, the factories, warehouses, and shipping facilities that keep Anywhere City's economy functioning. This area features wider roads suitable for heavy vehicles, vast open spaces between buildings, and the kind of infrastructure that criminal organizations find useful for smuggling, manufacturing illegal goods, and conducting business away from prying eyes. The industrial district's layout makes it ideal for certain types of missions, particularly those involving vehicle theft or the transportation of contraband. What truly distinguishes Grand Theft Auto 2 from its predecessor is the complex web of criminal organizations operating within Anywhere City. Rather than simply causing chaos for a single employer or working through a linear progression of missions, Claude Speed must navigate relationships with 7 different gangs, each with their own agenda, territory, and attitude toward the others. This multi-faction system creates a dynamic criminal underworld where loyalty is temporary and every action has consequences that ripple across the entire city. The Zaibatsu Corporation represents the most powerful and organized of these factions. Unlike traditional street gangs, the Zaibatsu is a massive corporate entity that has blurred the lines between legitimate business and organized crime. In the retro-futuristic setting of Anywhere City, corporations have accumulated enough power to operate as criminal syndicates in their own right, with private security forces, advanced technology, and the resources to dominate entire districts. Working for the Zaibatsu means participating in corporate warfare conducted with the tactics of street crime, a commentary on the potential future of unchecked capitalism. The loonies bring a chaotic, unpredictable element to Anywhere City's criminal landscape. This gang embraces madness as both aesthetic and strategy, their members dressed in distinctive garb and their missions often involving explosive mayhem. The loonies represent the anarchic element in the city's power structure, the faction least interested in traditional notions of territory or profit, and most interested in simply watching the world burn. Their presence ensures that Anywhere City's criminal ecosystem remains unstable, resistant to any one faction achieving total dominance. The Yakuza maintain their traditional organized crime structure even in this futuristic setting. As one of the more disciplined and hierarchical gangs, the Yakuza bring old-world criminal traditions into the new world of Anywhere City. Their operations focus on classic organized crime activities like protection rackets, gambling, and controlled violence. Working with the Yakuza means operating within a strict code of conduct, where honor and respect still carry weight even in a city that seems to have abandoned such concepts. The Russian mafia represents another transplanted criminal tradition adapting to Anywhere City's unique environment. Like the Yakuza, they bring organizational skills and international connections to their operations. The Russian mafia's presence in the city reflects the global nature of crime in this near-future setting, where criminal organizations from around the world compete for dominance in strategic urban centers. Their missions often involve smuggling, weapons trafficking, and violent enforcement of their territorial claims. The rednecks provide a stark contrast to the corporate sophistication of the Zaibatsu or the traditional structures of the Yakuza and Russians. This gang embraces a rural working-class identity even in the heart of urban Anywhere City, operating from the industrial district and focusing on activities that match their blue-collar aesthetic. The rednecks prove that even in a retro-futuristic metropolis, there is room for those who reject technological sophistication in favor of straightforward, brutal approaches to crime. The scientists represent perhaps the most unique faction in Anywhere City. This gang of researchers and technicians has turned their intellectual capabilities toward criminal ends, using advanced technology and scientific knowledge to carve out their niche in the criminal ecosystem. In a city where corporations like the Zaibatsu already blur the lines between legitimate research and criminal enterprise, the scientists take this fusion even further, conducting experiments and developing technologies without regard for ethics or legality. Finally, the Hare Krishnas round out the 7 gangs with perhaps the most unexpected criminal organization in the entire Grand Theft Auto franchise. This religious group has been transformed into a territorial gang, defending their turf and engaging in criminal activities to fund their operations. Their presence adds to the satirical edge of Anywhere City, suggesting that in this near future, even spiritual movements have been corrupted by the city's pervasive criminal culture. The genius of Grand Theft Auto 2's design lies in how these 7 gangs interact through the reputation system, a mechanical innovation that would influence future games in the series. When Claude Speed completes a mission for one gang, he earns respect with that organization, opening up access to more lucrative and complex jobs. However, these same actions often directly harm rival gangs, decreasing his standing with them and potentially making him a target for their members on the streets. This creates a dynamic where you must carefully consider not just the immediate rewards of a mission, but also the long-term consequences for your relationships across Anywhere City's criminal underworld. The reputation system transforms the city into a living ecosystem of alliances and rivalries. Help the Zaibatsu Corporation sabotage a Yakuza operation, and you might find yourself unable to walk through Yakuza territory without being attacked on sight. Complete enough missions for the loonies, and their rivals will actively hunt you between jobs. This mechanical system creates emergent gameplay scenarios where the consequences of your choices manifest in how the city itself responds to your presence. Anywhere City becomes more hostile or welcoming based on your history, making each playthrough potentially unique depending on which gangs you choose to support or betray. This reputation system also introduces strategic depth to mission selection. Rather than simply progressing through a linear campaign, you must think about which gangs to cultivate relationships with and which to antagonize. Some players might focus on building strong ties with 2 or 3 factions while accepting that others will become permanent enemies. Others might try to balance the reputation across multiple gangs, taking missions from various factions while trying to avoid actions that would permanently close off opportunities. The system rewards planning and punishes reckless mission acceptance, adding a layer of strategy to the criminal career. The missions themselves reflect the diverse nature of Anywhere City's gangs. Working for the Zaibatsu might involve corporate espionage or eliminating business rivals using methods that blur the line between hostile takeover and assassination. The loonies send you on chaotic errands involving explosives and maximum destruction. The Yakuza demand precision and discipline in their operations. The Russian mafia focuses on smuggling and territorial enforcement. The rednecks favor straightforward violence and theft. The scientists request assistance with morally questionable experiments. Even the Hare Krishnas have their own unique flavor of criminal activity, filtered through their religious identity. Between missions, Anywhere City itself provides the playground for emergent chaos. The top-down perspective returns from the first game, refined and expanded. The retro-futuristic setting manifests in the visual design, with vehicles that look like exaggerated versions of contemporary cars, buildings that blend modern architecture with science fiction aesthetics, and technology that feels both advanced and oddly dated. This visual style reinforces the temporal ambiguity, creating a world that exists outside normal chronology. The game introduces new systems and refinements to the Grand Theft Auto formula. Vehicles now have more variety in handling and purpose. The wanted level system returns, but with modifications that reflect the corporate nature of Anywhere City. Rather than just police, you might find yourself pursued by corporate security forces or gang members depending on your reputation. The city feels more reactive, more alive with competing interests beyond just law enforcement. Grand Theft Auto 2's place in the overall timeline remains deliberately isolated. The ambiguous setting, the generic location of Anywhere City, and the retro-futuristic aesthetic all serve to separate this entry from the more grounded continuity that would develop in later games. While Claude Speed shares a first name with the protagonist of Grand Theft Auto 3, the connection remains unclear and possibly coincidental. The game exists in its own pocket of the franchise's multiverse, a vision of a near future that never quite connects to the past explored in the first game, or the future that would be established in the 3D universe. This isolation actually serves the game's themes. Anywhere City is nowhere and everywhere, a place unmoored from specific geography or history. The near future setting suggests a world that has evolved from our present, but in ways that feel slightly off, as if reality took a turn toward the absurd. The 7 gangs represent different aspects of society taken to criminal extremes, from corporate power to religious movements to traditional organized crime. Together, they create a portrait of a future where every institution has been corrupted, where crime has become so pervasive that it operates openly in the form of competing factions vying for dominance. The reputation system, beyond its mechanical innovations, reinforces the game's cynical worldview. In Anywhere City, loyalty is purely transactional. Claude Speed is not building lasting relationships or working towards some greater goal. He is simply a mercenary moving between employers, his allegiance determined entirely by who is currently paying. The gangs themselves show no real loyalty to him, turning hostile the moment his actions harm their interests. This creates a portrait of a criminal underworld, and, by extension, a society, built entirely on self-interest and temporary alliances of convenience. Grand Theft Auto 2 stands as perhaps the most experimental entry in the franchise's early years, a game willing to abandon the semi-realistic settings of its predecessor and successor in favor of a satirical near-future vision. Its influence on the series would be felt more in its systems than its setting, with the reputation, mechanics, and multi-faction design informing later games even as the specific world of Anywhere City remained a one-time experiment. In the grand timeline of Grand Theft Auto, it represents a detour, a glimpse at what the franchise might have become if it had pursued science fiction rather than crime fiction, satire of the future rather than satire of the present. Nearly a decade after the chaotic gang wars of 2013, the Grand Theft Auto series would undergo its most revolutionary transformation. By the year 2001, Liberty City has evolved into something entirely new, a sprawling three-dimensional metropolis that would redefine not just the franchise, but open-world gaming as a whole. This is where we meet Claude, a man whose silence speaks volumes and whose quest for vengeance will take him through every dark corner of the criminal underworld. The story begins with what should have been a simple bank robbery. Claude and his girlfriend Catalina, along with an accomplice, execute a heist at a Liberty City bank, but as they make their escape, Catalina reveals her true nature in the most brutal way possible. She shoots Claude, leaving him bleeding in the street, and speeds away with both the money and her new lover, a small-time criminal who will come to regret his association with her. For Claude, this betrayal is total and absolute. The woman he trusted has left him for dead, and as police sirens close in, he finds himself arrested and facing a lengthy prison sentence for a crime that earned him nothing but a bullet wound. Claude's fortune, however, takes an unexpected turn during his transport to prison. The police convoy carrying him and other prisoners across the Callahan Bridge comes under attack by members of the Colombian cartel, who are attempting to free a high-ranking member being transferred in the same vehicle. In the chaos of the ambush, with explosions rocking the bridge and gunfire erupting from all sides, Claude seizes his opportunity. He escapes into the city, a wanted man with nothing to his name but the clothes on his back and a burning desire for revenge against the woman who betrayed him. His first ally in this new life as a fugitive comes in the form of 8-Ball, a demolitions expert and fellow escapee from the prison transport. 8-Ball, who was also injured during the ambush, recognizes that both men need help to survive in a city where the police are hunting them. He introduces Claude to Luigi Godarelli, the owner of a club in the red light district of Portland, the first of Liberty City's 3 islands. Luigi runs his establishment as a front for the Leone crime family, one of the most powerful mafia organizations in the city, and he's always looking for capable men who can handle the kind of work that requires discretion and a willingness to get their hands dirty. Claude, being a silent protagonist throughout his entire journey, never speaks a single word. This silence is not a limitation, but rather a defining characteristic. He communicates through actions, and his actions speak of a man who is efficient, ruthless, and utterly focused on his goal. For Luigi, Claude becomes an invaluable asset, handling everything from collecting protection money to dealing with troublesome customers and rival gang members. His competence quickly catches the attention of higher-ranking members of the Leone family. Through Luigi, Claude meets Joey Leone, the son of the family's Don, Salvatore Leone. Joey is young, ambitious, and eager to prove himself in the family business. He runs a garage in Trenton, another district of Portland, and he puts Claude to work on various jobs that serve both his personal interests and the family's broader operations. Some jobs involve stealing cars, others require intimidation, or worse. Through Joey, Claude also encounters Tony Cipriani, a made man in the Leone family who has his own set of tasks that need handling. Each job Claude completes builds his reputation within the organization, and more importantly, each job brings him deeper into Liberty City's criminal network, expanding his search for Catalina. The structure of Liberty City itself is worth understanding. The metropolis is divided into 3 main islands, each with its own character and criminal landscape. Portland, where Claude begins his journey, is industrial and rough, home to the Leone family's operations and the Red Light District. Staunton Island, the central business district, houses the city's financial centers, upscale establishments, and the operations of various other criminal organizations. Shoreside Vale, the third island, contains both wealthy residential areas and the city's airport. Initially, Claude can only access Portland, as the Callahan Bridge remains damaged from the cartel ambush, and the other bridges are closed for various reasons. This geographical limitation forces him to establish himself thoroughly in Portland before expanding his operations. As Claude rises through the ranks of the Leone family, he eventually comes to the attention of Don Salvatore Leone himself. Salvatore is old-school mafia, a man who built his empire through cunning, violence, and an iron will. He sees potential in Claude, appreciating his silence as discretion and his effectiveness as loyalty. Salvatore entrusts Claude with increasingly important jobs, including those that involve his young wife, Maria Latorre. Maria is significantly younger than Salvatore, impulsive, and deeply unhappy in her marriage to the aging Don. She's also addicted to various substances and constantly seeking excitement that her life as a mob wife doesn't provide. Through his work for the Leones, Claude also encounters Asuka Kaisen, a high-ranking member of the Yakuza, the Japanese organized crime syndicate that operates in Liberty City. Asuka is intelligent, calculating, and ruthless in her own right. She represents a different kind of criminal power than the Italian mafia, one based on different traditions and methods but equally effective. The Yakuza's operations in Liberty City are substantial, and they're not always aligned with the Leone family's interests. However, Asuka sees something useful in Claude, and their paths will become more intertwined as events unfold. The turning point in Claude's relationship with the Leone family comes through a combination of circumstances involving Maria and Salvatore's growing paranoia. Maria, in her reckless way, begins to involve Claude in her personal affairs, using him as a driver and companion for her various excursions around the city. Salvatore, already suspicious by nature and made more so by the pressures of running a criminal empire in an increasingly competitive environment, begins to suspect that Maria is having an affair with Claude. Whether this suspicion has any basis in reality is almost irrelevant. In Salvatore's world, the appearance of betrayal is as dangerous as betrayal itself. When Salvatore orders Claude to pick up a car and drive it to a specific location, Asuka intervenes with a warning. The car is rigged with a bomb, meant to eliminate Claude as a potential threat and a suspected rival for Maria's affections. This revelation forces Claude to make a choice. He cannot return to the Leone family, as doing so would mean certain death. Instead, he accepts Asuka's offer to work for the Yakuza, burning his bridges with the mafia and making Salvatore Leone a powerful enemy in the process. Working for Asuka and her brother Kenji opens new opportunities and new areas of Liberty City to Claude. The bridges to Staunton Island are now accessible, expanding his operational territory significantly. Asuka's jobs are different from the Leone family's work, reflecting the Yakuza's different priorities and methods. She's concerned with maintaining her organization's territory, dealing with rival gangs, and protecting their various business interests, which range from legitimate enterprises to drug trafficking and extortion. Through Asuka, Claude also meets her brother Kenji, who handles many of the Yakuza's day-to-day operations and has his own network of contacts and enemies throughout the city. The criminal landscape of Liberty City in 2001 is complex and constantly shifting. Beyond the Leone family and the Yakuza, there are numerous other factions vying for power and territory. The Colombian cartel, the same organization whose ambush freed Claude from the prison transport, controls significant drug trafficking operations. The Southside Hoods, an African-American gang, control parts of Portland. The Yardies, a Jamaican gang, operate their own territories. The Diablos, a Hispanic gang, are another factor in the city's criminal equation. Each of these organizations has its own agenda, and they're all in constant conflict with each other, creating a volatile environment where alliances shift and violence is a daily occurrence. As Claude works for the Yakuza, he also begins taking jobs from other clients who hear of his reputation. Donald Love, a wealthy and eccentric businessman with political ambitions, employs Claude for various tasks that blur the line between legitimate business and outright criminality. Love is preparing to make a bid for mayor of Liberty City, and he needs someone who can handle the dirty work that such ambitions require. Ray Machowski, a corrupt police officer who's been taking bribes and doing favors for criminals for years, also seeks Claude's help. Ray's position has become precarious as Internal Affairs begins investigating police corruption, and he needs someone outside the department to help him cover his tracks and eventually escape the city before he's arrested. Throughout all of these jobs and shifting alliances, Claude never loses sight of his ultimate goal. He's searching for Catalina, the woman who betrayed him, and he's willing to work for anyone and do anything if it brings him closer to finding her. The criminal underworld of Liberty City is interconnected in ways that aren't always obvious, and each job, each contact, Each alliance potentially brings him one step closer to his revenge. The situation becomes more complicated and more violent as the various criminal factions begin to move against each other more openly. Asuka, seeking to weaken the Colombian cartel's position in the city, orders Claude to carry out attacks that are designed to look like they were perpetrated by other gangs, hoping to spark conflicts that will benefit the Yakuza. These false flag operations work perhaps too well, as gang warfare escalates throughout Liberty City, with shootouts becoming common occurrences and the body count rising steadily. Then, tragedy strikes the Yakuza directly. Kenji Kassen is assassinated in what appears to be a targeted hit. For Asuka, this is both a personal loss and a blow to her organization's standing. Her grief transforms into cold fury, and she becomes even more determined to destroy her enemies and maintain the Yakuza's power in the city. She intensifies her operations, with Claude serving as her primary instrument of revenge and enforcement. It's during this period of escalating violence that Claude finally gets the lead he's been waiting for. Catalina resurfaces, and the circumstances of her return reveal just how deeply she's embedded herself in Liberty City's criminal world. She's now the leader of a faction of the Colombian cartel, having worked her way up through a combination of ruthlessness and her relationship with her new boyfriend Miguel. More than that, she's been orchestrating operations throughout the city, and her actions have been affecting multiple criminal organizations, including those Claude has been working for. The final confrontation is set in motion when Catalina makes her ultimate play. She kidnaps Maria, who by this point has become connected to Claude through their various interactions. Catalina demands a ransom, not primarily for the money, but as a way to draw Claude out. She knows he's been looking for her, and in her twisted way, she wants this confrontation as much as he does. She specifies that the exchange will take place at the Cochrane Dam in Shoreside Vale, a remote location that gives her tactical advantages. Claude, now with full access to all 3 islands of Liberty City and having accumulated resources, weapons, and knowledge from his time working through the criminal underworld, prepares for the final showdown. The journey to the dam is fraught with danger, as Catalina has positioned cartel members throughout the route to stop him. But Claude has become something more than the man who was betrayed during that bank robbery. He's become a force unto himself in Liberty City's underworld, feared and respected by multiple criminal organizations. At the dam, the confrontation unfolds with the intensity that's been building since that first betrayal. Catalina, true to her nature, has no intention of a simple exchange. She wants Claude dead, and she's prepared to use every resource at her disposal to make that happen. The battle that ensues is brutal and decisive. Claude, driven by months of focused determination and armed with everything he's learned navigating Liberty City's criminal landscape, fights his way through Catalina's defenses. In the end, Claude's revenge is complete. Catalina, the woman who betrayed him and set him on this path, is dead. Maria is rescued, though her constant talking suggests that Claude may have traded one problem for another. But as they leave the dam together, one thing is certain. Claude has carved out his place in Liberty City's underworld, rising from a betrayed criminal left for dead to someone who has worked with and against the most powerful criminal organizations in the city. His silence remains unbroken, but his actions have spoken loudly enough to echo through every corner of Liberty City's 3 islands. We now rewind the clock 3 years before the catastrophic events of Grand Theft Auto 3 to examine the circumstances that set that chaos in motion. In 1998, Liberty City stands at a crossroads, its criminal underworld engaged in a brutal power struggle that will reshape the city's organized crime landscape for years to come. This is the era of Grand Theft Auto, Liberty City Stories, a chapter that pulls back the curtain on the machinations, betrayals, and violence that paved the way for the Liberty City we would later witness in ruins. The story centers on Antonio Tony Cipriani, a made man in the Leone crime family who finds himself returning to Liberty City after a 4-year exile. Tony's absence wasn't voluntary. He had been forced to flee the city after killing a made man from a rival family, a transgression serious enough to warrant a death sentence in the rigid hierarchy of organized crime. For 4 years, Tony laid low, waiting for the heat to die down and for his connections within the Leone family to smooth things over. Now, in 1998, he's finally received word that it's safe to come home. But Liberty City has changed during his absence, and the Leone family's grip on power has weakened considerably. When Tony arrives back in Portland, the traditional stronghold of the Leone family, he immediately reconnects with his old boss, Salvatore Leone. Salvatore, who you may remember as the crime lord, whose paranoia would later lead to catastrophic consequences in 2001, is at this point still firmly in control of his organization, but facing unprecedented challenges to his authority. The Sicilian mobster runs his empire from his mansion in Portland, orchestrating the family's various criminal enterprises ranging from protection rackets to loan sharking to control of the city's garbage collection industry. But Salvatore's position is far from secure. 2 rival mafia families, the Sindacos and the Forellis, have been making aggressive moves into Leone territory and various other criminal organizations sense weakness and opportunity. Tony's return couldn't come at a better time for Salvatore. The Don needs loyal, capable soldiers now more than ever, and Tony has always been one of his most reliable enforcers. Despite having been away for 4 years, Tony quickly proves his worth by handling various problems that have been plaguing the family. His first tasks involve basic enforcement work, reminding the neighborhood that the Leones are still in charge, collecting debts, and dealing with small-time operations that have gotten too bold in the family's absence of strong leadership. But Tony's life isn't just complicated by mob politics. He also has to contend with his overbearing mother, Maria Cipriani, a domineering woman who constantly belittles her son and compares him unfavorably to other mobsters. Despite Tony's status as a respected made man and his proven loyalty to the Leone family, his mother treats him like a disappointment, always pushing him to achieve more, to rise higher in the organization, to prove himself worthy of the Cipriani name. This toxic family dynamic adds a darkly comic element to Tony's story, humanizing him even as he commits increasingly brutal acts in service of his crime family. As Tony works to re-establish the Leone family's dominance, he becomes entangled in the complex web of corruption that defines Liberty City's power structure. One of his key allies in this effort is Joseph Daniel O'Toole, better known as JD, a corrupt union leader who controls much of the city's blue-collar workforce. JD's influence over the unions gives the Leone family leverage in various industries, particularly construction and waste management. Through JD, Tony is able to organize strikes, sabotage rival operations, and ensure that Leone-friendly businesses receive preferential treatment. However, JD proves to be an unreliable partner, his loyalty always for sale to the highest bidder, and Tony must constantly manage this relationship to keep the union boss in line. The political landscape of Liberty City in 1998 is equally corrupt. Tony finds himself working with various city officials who are either on the Leone payroll or can be persuaded to look the other way when it benefits them. One particularly important figure is Donald Love, who at this point in the timeline is still building his real estate empire and learning the ruthless tactics that will define his later career. Love uses Tony as muscle to eliminate business rivals and clear properties for development, demonstrating the symbiotic relationship between organized crime and legitimate business in Liberty City. The line between legal and illegal enterprise is razor thin, with money and violence serving as the common language spoken by both worlds. The Sindaco crime family represents one of the most serious threats to Leone dominance during this period. The Sindacos, led by Paulie Sindaco, have been making aggressive moves into traditional Leone territory, particularly in the gambling and entertainment sectors. They operate several casinos and adult entertainment venues, and they've been using their profits to fund an expansion that directly challenges Salvatore's authority. Tony is tasked with disrupting Sindaco operations, which leads to a series of violent confrontations. He sabotages their businesses, eliminates their key personnel, and generally makes it clear that the Leones won't tolerate further encroachment on their territory. The conflict with the Sindacos escalates dramatically when Tony discovers that they've been working with corrupt elements within the city government to undermine Leone interests. This revelation leads to increasingly bold strikes against Sindaco holdings. Tony destroys their property, intimidates their associates, and systematically dismantles their operations across the city. The violence reaches a fever pitch as both families engage in open warfare on the streets of Liberty City, with shootouts and car bombs becoming disturbingly common occurrences. The Forelli crime family, another major player in Liberty City's underworld, also factors heavily into the power struggle of 1998. The Forellis, who you may recall from earlier in the timeline as the family that employed Tommy Vercetti before his imprisonment, maintain a significant presence in Liberty City despite their setbacks in Vice City. Led by Franco Forelli during this period, the family attempts to capitalize on the conflict between the Leones and Sindacos to expand their own influence. This three-way power struggle creates a volatile situation where alliances shift rapidly and violence can erupt at any moment. Salvatore Leone, throughout all of this chaos, proves to be a cunning and ruthless leader. He plays his rivals against each other, uses Tony as his primary weapon, and makes strategic moves to consolidate power. However, Salvatore's methods also reveal the paranoia and vindictiveness that will eventually contribute to his downfall in 2001. He's quick to suspect betrayal, harsh in his punishments, and willing to eliminate anyone he perceives as a threat, even former allies. Tony witnesses this darker side of his boss but remains loyal, understanding that in the world of organized crime, loyalty to your family is the only currency that matters. One of the most significant plot threads involves the mayoral race in Liberty City. Salvatore has been backing a candidate named Miles O'Donovan, hoping to install a mayor who will be completely under Leone control. However, the election becomes a battlefield as rival families back their own candidates and attempt to manipulate the outcome through various means, both legal and illegal. Tony finds himself engaged in political dirty tricks, intimidating voters, sabotaging campaign events, and eliminating problematic candidates. The election storyline illustrates how deeply organized crime has infiltrated every level of Liberty City's government, with the democratic process becoming just another arena for mob warfare. The situation becomes even more complex when it's revealed that various factions within the city are playing multiple sides against each other. Corrupt politicians take money from all the crime families, promising each one exclusive influence while actually serving their own interests. Law enforcement, while ostensibly fighting organized crime, is riddled with officers on various payrolls. The FBI maintains a presence in the city, but their investigations are hampered by the deep-rooted corruption and the code of silence that pervades the criminal underworld. Tony must navigate this treacherous landscape, never quite sure who can be trusted and who might be setting him up for a fall. As the year progresses and Tony continues his work for the Leone family, he becomes involved in increasingly high-stakes operations. He's not just collecting debts and roughing up small-time operators anymore. He's orchestrating major criminal enterprises, planning complex heists, and eliminating high-profile targets. His reputation grows within the family, and Salvatore comes to rely on him more and more for the most sensitive and dangerous assignments. This increased responsibility also brings increased danger, as Tony becomes a prime target for rival families, who recognize him as a key asset to the Leones. The conflict with the Sindacos reaches its climax when Tony discovers a major plot against the Leone family. The Sindacos have been planning a coordinated strike designed to eliminate Salvatore and decapitate the Leone organization in one fell swoop. Tony manages to uncover this plot and turn it back against the Sindacos, leading to a series of violent confrontations that effectively break the Sindaco family's power in Liberty City. The victory is brutal and total, with the Sindacos left in disarray and the Leones reasserting their dominance over key territories and criminal enterprises. The Forelli family doesn't fare much better. As the Leones consolidate their power, they systematically undermine Forelli operations across the city. Tony plays a central role in these efforts, striking at Forelli businesses, eliminating their key personnel, and generally making it impossible for them to maintain their foothold in Liberty City. By the end of 1998, the Forellis have been significantly weakened, their influence in the city reduced to a shadow of what it once was. This sets the stage for their continued decline, which will be evident when we return to Liberty City in 2001. Throughout this period, Tony also has to deal with various other criminal elements in the city. The Triads, the Diablo Street Gang, and various independent operators all factor into the complex criminal ecosystem of Liberty City. Some become temporary allies, others are obstacles to be eliminated, but all represent the chaotic and violent nature of the city's underworld. Tony's ability to navigate these relationships, to know when to negotiate and when to use violence, proves essential to his success and to the Leone family's resurgence. The game also explores the day-to-day operations of organized crime in a way that adds depth to our understanding of how these families function. We see the importance of legitimate business fronts, the role of money laundering, the necessity of maintaining relationships with corrupt officials, and the constant need for violence to enforce discipline and maintain territory. Tony isn't just a mindless enforcer. He's a businessman in a very legal business, and his success depends on his ability to understand the economics and politics of organized crime, as much as his willingness to pull a trigger. By the end of 1998, Tony Cipriani has successfully helped restore the Leone family to its position of dominance in Liberty City. The Sindacos and Forellis have been pushed back, corrupt officials are firmly in the Leone pocket, and Salvatore's authority is unquestioned. Tony himself has risen in the family's ranks, his loyalty and effectiveness earning him a position as one of Salvatore's most trusted capos. The city's criminal landscape has been reshaped through violence and cunning, setting the stage for the relative stability the Leone family will enjoy over the next few years. However, the seeds of future problems have also been planted during this tumultuous year. Salvatore's increasing paranoia, his willingness to turn on former allies, and his brutal methods of maintaining control all point toward the instability that will eventually contribute to the family's vulnerability in 2001. The corruption that Tony has helped spread throughout the city's institutions will make Liberty City even more dysfunctional and prone to chaos, and the enemies that the Leones have made during their ruthless consolidation of power will be waiting for any opportunity to strike back. Liberty City. Stories serves as a crucial prequel, filling in the backstory of the city we would later see torn apart by gang warfare and catastrophe. It shows us how Salvatore Leone built his empire, how the criminal power structure of the city was established, and how men like Tony Cipriani became the enforcers and operators who would shape Liberty City's underworld for years to come. The events of 1998 set the stage for everything that follows, making this chapter essential to understanding the full scope of Liberty City's criminal history, and the forces that would eventually lead to its near collapse just 3 years later. 20 years after the events of Liberty City Stories and following the chaos that engulfed Vice City and San Andreas in the early 90s, the Grand Theft Auto series returns to Liberty City in 2008. But this is a different city than we've seen before. Reimagined from the ground up, this version of Liberty City is darker, grittier, and more realistic than any depiction that came before it. The neon-soaked excess of the 80s and the gang warfare of the 90s have given way to something more grounded, more contemporary, and in many ways more unsettling. Our protagonist this time is Niko Bellic, an Eastern European immigrant who arrives in Liberty City aboard a cargo ship called the Platypus. Unlike the established criminals we've played as before, Niko is a stranger in a strange land, carrying with him the weight of a traumatic past and chasing what he believes might be a fresh start. His cousin Roman has been sending him emails for years, painting a picture of incredible success in America, talking about mansions, sports cars, and beautiful women. the American dream in its purest, most seductive form. The reality, as Niko discovers the moment he steps off that ship, is considerably less glamorous. Roman doesn't own a fleet of luxury vehicles. He runs a small, struggling taxi depot in the borough of Broker, Liberty City's stand-in for Brooklyn. He doesn't live in a mansion, but rather a cramped apartment in one of the city's rougher neighborhoods. And those beautiful women? Roman spends most of his time being harassed by loan sharks over his substantial gambling debts. The American dream, it turns out, is just that. A dream, always just out of reach no matter how hard you grasp for it. But Niko hasn't come to Liberty City purely for opportunity. He's also running from something, and more importantly, he's searching for someone. During the Yugoslav wars of the 1990s, Niko served in the military and later worked as a criminal alongside a tight-knit group of comrades. During one particular operation, their unit was ambushed and most of his friends were killed. Only 3 people knew the details of that operation, which means one of them betrayed the others. 2 of those men, Florian Kravic and Darko Breivik, are supposedly somewhere in America. Niko has come to find them, to get answers, and quite possibly to exact revenge. This dual motivation, the pursuit of the American dream and the pursuit of vengeance, forms the thematic backbone of Grand Theft Auto V's narrative. Niko is immediately a more complex and conflicted protagonist than the series has given us before. He's capable of extreme violence, hardened by war and criminal experience, but he's also weary, philosophical, and increasingly disillusioned with the life he's been forced to lead. He wants to escape his past, but circumstances and his own skills keep pulling him back into the underworld. Almost immediately upon arrival, Niko is forced to help Roman deal with his creditors, the loan sharks who have been threatening Roman work for a local criminal named Vlad Glebov, who also happens to be sleeping with Roman's girlfriend Mallory. When Niko confronts Vlad about his disrespect, the situation escalates, and Niko ends up killing him. This murder brings the cousins to the attention of Vlad's employer, Mikhail Faustin, a volatile Russian mobster with a hair-trigger temper and a serious cocaine problem. Faustin, along with his more level-headed partner Dimitri Raskolov, initially seems angry about Vlad's death, but Faustin actually appreciates Niko's directness and brutality. He begins employing Niko for various jobs, each one more reckless and attention-grabbing than the last. Faustin's erratic behavior is making him a liability to everyone around him, and his actions are drawing unwanted heat from other criminal organizations and law enforcement alike. Eventually, Dimitri approaches Niko with a proposition: kill Faustin, and Dimitri will take over the organization and ensure Niko and Roman are well compensated and protected. Niko reluctantly agrees, shooting Faustin during a meeting and believing he's secured a powerful ally in Dimitri. This proves to be a catastrophic miscalculation. Dimitri has no intention of honoring his promises. Instead, he partners with Ray Bulgarin, a Russian crime lord who claims that Niko once stole from him years ago in Europe. Whether this claim is true or not becomes almost irrelevant as Dimitri sets up Niko for an ambush. Niko barely escapes with his life, and in retaliation, Dimitri has Roman's taxi depot and apartment burned to the ground. This betrayal forces Niko and Roman to flee Broker and relocate to Bohan, Liberty City's equivalent of the Bronx, one of the poorest and most dangerous boroughs in the city. They're starting over from nothing, and now Niko has another enemy to worry about. The pattern that will define much of Niko's time in Liberty City is established. He works for various criminals to make money and gather information, but each alliance eventually sours. Each friendship reveals itself to be transactional, and the violence only begets more violence. In Bohan, Niko begins working for Lizabeta Torres, a drug dealer who connects him with several other significant figures in Liberty City's underworld. Through Elizabeta, Niko meets Playboy X, a young drug dealer who styles himself as a community activist and businessman, and his mentor Dwayne Forge, who has just been released from prison after serving time for Playboy's crimes. The relationship between Playboy and Dwayne is strained. Playboy has moved on, embraced a flashier lifestyle, and sees Dwayne as a relic of an older, less sophisticated criminal era. Dwayne, meanwhile, is struggling to readjust to life outside prison and feels betrayed by his former protege. This tension eventually reaches a breaking point when both men separately approach Niko and ask him to kill the other. Here, the game presents players with one of several major moral choices that define the experience. You can kill Dwayne, the depressed ex-convict who trusted the wrong people, and maintain your business relationship with the more profitable Playboy. Or you can kill Playboy, the disloyal opportunist, and preserve your friendship with the more genuine but troubled Dwayne. There's no right answer, and both choices carry emotional weight and practical consequences. As Niko continues working his way through Liberty City's criminal ecosystem, he also pursues leads on the men he's searching for. He eventually tracks down Florian Kravic, who now goes by the name Bernie Crane and lives in the affluent neighborhood of Middle Park West. Bernie is living a secret life as a gay man, terrified that his sexuality will be exposed to his homophobic friends and associates. When Niko confronts him, Bernie insists he wasn't the traitor and suggests it must have been Darko. Niko believes him partly because Bernie seems too weak and frightened to have orchestrated such a betrayal, and partly because Niko wants to believe that at least one of his old friends remained true. Through various criminal contacts, Niko also begins working for the McCreary family, an Irish-American crime family based in Duke's, Liberty City's version of Queens. The McCreary brothers, Derek, Francis, and Packy, along with their sister Kate, represent another facet of Liberty City's criminal landscape. Derek is a drug-addicted former IRA operative. Francis is a corrupt police deputy commissioner who uses his position to eliminate rivals and protect his own criminal interests. Packy is a bank robber and the most straightforward of the brothers. And Kate is trying to maintain some sense of normalcy and morality in a family that has long since abandoned both. Niko grows particularly close to Packy and Kate. Packy becomes something like a genuine friend, one of the few people in Liberty City who seems to value Niko for more than just his capacity for violence. Kate, meanwhile, becomes a potential romantic interest, though their relationship is complicated by Kate's traditional values and her family's criminal activities. She represents the possibility of a normal life, of redemption, of something beyond the endless cycle of jobs and violence. But normal life continues to elude Niko. He works for Francis McCreary, carrying out assassinations of people Francis considers threats. He works for the United Liberty Paper, a mysterious government contact who uses Niko to eliminate terrorists and political inconveniences in exchange for information and immigration assistance. He works for various other criminals, each job bringing in money but also drawing him deeper into the underworld and further from any possibility of escape. The situation with Dimitri and Bulgarin continues to escalate. Roman, despite everything, manages to rebuild his taxi business and even gets engaged to Mallory. There are brief moments of hope, suggestions that maybe Niko and Roman can actually achieve some version of the life Roman promised in those emails. But Dimitri remains a constant threat, a reminder that the past never truly stays buried. Eventually, through his government contact, Niko finally gets the information he's been seeking. Darko Brevich is located and brought to Liberty City. In a parking lot at the airport, Niko comes face to face with the man who betrayed him and his unit all those years ago. Darko is a wreck, a drug addict who sold out his comrades for a mere $1,000 to feed his habit. He's pathetic, broken, barely even aware of the magnitude of what he did. And here, the game presents Niko and the player with another crucial choice. Kill Darko or let him live. If you kill him, Niko gets his revenge, but it feels hollow. Darko was already destroyed by his own choices and addictions. Killing him changes nothing and brings none of Niko's dead friends back. If you spare him, Niko demonstrates growth, a rejection of the cycle of violence that has defined his life. Roman, who is present for this confrontation, urges Niko to let it go, to choose mercy over vengeance. Regardless of the choice, the encounter is profoundly unsatisfying. The revenge Niko has been pursuing across continents and years doesn't provide the closure or peace he thought it would. The past remains painful no matter what he does in the present. As the story approaches its conclusion, Dimitri contacts Niko with a business proposition. He's arranged a major heroin deal and offers Niko a cut if he'll let bygones be bygones and work together. Simultaneously, Roman's wedding to Mallory is approaching, a rare moment of genuine celebration and hope. Niko must decide whether to accept Dimitri's deal or attempt to exact revenge by disrupting it. This final choice determines which of two possible endings the player experiences. If you choose the deal option, Niko agrees to work with Dimitri one last time. The deal goes wrong, as deals with Dimitri inevitably do, but Niko gets his money. At Roman's wedding, however, a hitman sent by Dimitri attempts to kill Niko. Roman steps in front of the bullet and is killed instead. Niko loses his cousin, the person who brought him to America, the only family he had left. The American dream dies with Roman on what should have been the happiest day of his life. If you choose the revenge option, Niko rejects Dimitri's offer and instead tracks him down to exact vengeance. Niko kills Dimitri, but this act of revenge sets off its own chain of consequences. At Roman's wedding, which proceeds without incident this time, a different hitman appears. This one is sent by Pegorino, a minor mafia boss Niko had been working with who was counting on the money from Dimitri's deal. The hitman attempts to shoot Niko, but instead kills Kate McCreary, the woman who represented Niko's chance at redemption and a normal life. Either way, Niko loses someone he loves. Either way, the cycle of violence claims another innocent victim. Either way, the pursuit of the American dream and the pursuit of revenge both prove to be hollow, destructive endeavors. In the aftermath, Niko, along with Packy and other allies, tracks down and kills the remaining antagonists. But these final acts of violence feel less like triumph and more like resignation. Niko has survived, but at tremendous cost, and Liberty City remains exactly what it was when he arrived. A place where dreams go to die and where violence perpetuates itself endlessly. Grand Theft Auto 4 represents a tonal shift for the series, trading the satirical excess of previous entries for something more grounded and melancholic. The game explores themes of immigration, the gap between American mythology and American reality, the impossibility of escaping one's past, and the futility of revenge. Niko Bellic is a tragic figure, a man capable of terrible things who nonetheless yearns for something better, something peaceful, but who is ultimately trapped by circumstances, choices, and the very skills that allow him to survive. Liberty City in 2008 is a place of broken dreams and compromised morals, where everyone is chasing something they'll never catch and where the only certainty is that violence will always find you, no matter how far you run. While Niko Bellic navigates his personal war through Liberty City in 2008, another story unfolds in parallel on the same blood-soaked streets. This is the story of Johnny Klebitz, acting president of the Lost Motorcycle Club, a one-percenter outlaw biker gang operating out of a clubhouse in Actor, Alderney. Where Niko's tale explores the immigrant experience and the corrosive nature of revenge, Johnny's narrative dives deep into brotherhood, loyalty, and the slow disintegration of both. Johnny Klebitz is a different breed of protagonist from the criminals we've encountered so far. He's a lifer in the outlaw motorcycle world, a man who found family and purpose in the Lost MC when conventional society offered him neither. For years, he served the club faithfully, rising through the ranks through dedication and competence rather than flashy violence or reckless ambition. When the club's president, Billy Gray, was sentenced to a stint in rehab for drug-related offenses, Johnny stepped up as acting president, a role he never sought but accepted out of duty to his brothers. Under Johnny's leadership, the Lost MC has maintained a profitable if precarious existence. They run guns, deal drugs, provide muscle for hire, and control various criminal rackets throughout Alderney and parts of Liberty City proper. But Johnny's approach differs fundamentally from the traditional outlaw biker mentality. He's cautious, calculating, always weighing risk against reward. He understands that the old days of biker gangs operating with impunity are long gone, that law enforcement has become more sophisticated, that rival gangs have grown more dangerous, and that survival requires adaptation. His pragmatism has kept the Lost alive and relatively prosperous, but it's also created tension within the club's ranks, particularly among the younger, more hot-headed members who see his caution as weakness. The fragile stability Johnny has maintained shatters when Billy Gray completes his court-mandated rehab and returns to reclaim his position as club president. Billy is everything Johnny is not. Charismatic, impulsive, and dangerously nostalgic for a mythical past when bikers were free spirits living outside society's rules. He's also, despite the rehab, still very much an addict, though his drug of choice now seems to be chaos itself. Billy immediately begins undermining Johnny's careful arrangements, pushing the club toward increasingly reckless criminal enterprises and unnecessary conflicts with rival gangs. The tension between Johnny's pragmatism and Billy's recklessness creates a schism within the Lost. Some members, like the massive enforcer Clay Simons, nicknamed Clay the Shitter, remain loyal to Johnny, recognizing that his leadership has kept them alive and out of prison. Others, particularly younger members hungry for the outlaw lifestyle they've romanticized, gravitate toward Billy's more aggressive approach. Johnny finds himself in an impossible position. His loyalty to the club and its traditions demands he respect Billy's authority as president, but his responsibility to his brothers demands he protect them from Billy's self-destructive impulses. The situation grows more complicated through the Lost's various criminal entanglements. The club has business relationships with several major players in Liberty City's underworld, including the Pecorino crime family, one of the city's struggling mafia organizations. Johnny frequently finds himself serving as a go-between, negotiating deals and carrying out jobs for people he doesn't trust, all while trying to keep Billy from torpedoing these crucial alliances with his erratic behavior. It's through these criminal connections that Johnny's story begins intersecting with Niko Bellic's narrative. The two men cross paths multiple times throughout 2008, sometimes as uneasy allies, sometimes as competitors, occasionally as enemies, though neither bears the other particular ill will. During a major diamond deal orchestrated by Ray Bocchino, an associate of the Pecorino family, both Johnny and Niko are present when the exchange goes catastrophically wrong. The diamonds, worth millions, end up lost in the chaos, and both men find themselves chasing the same prize through different channels. These intersections aren't coincidental, but rather illustrate how Liberty City's criminal underworld operates as an interconnected ecosystem where the same valuable commodities and criminal opportunities circulate among various players. Another intersection occurs during a bank robbery in which both Johnny and Niko participate as part of different crews. From Johnny's perspective, it's a job arranged through the Lost criminal connections, a chance to score big and prove the club's worth to their business partners. The heist itself is a tense, violent affair that showcases the professionalism Johnny brings to his criminal work, but it also demonstrates the increasingly tangled web of alliances and obligations that bind Liberty City's criminals together. Throughout these events, Johnny maintains a complicated personal life that adds another layer of pressure to his already stressful existence. He's in an on-again, off-again relationship with Ashley Butler, a woman he clearly cares for despite recognizing that she's bad for him. Ashley is an addict, constantly chasing her next high, and her dependency makes her vulnerable to manipulation by Billy, who uses her as a tool to undermine Johnny's authority and emotional stability. The relationship between Johnny and Ashley is toxic and codependent, a reflection of how both are trapped in self-destructive patterns they can't seem to escape. Johnny enables Ashley's addiction even as he resents it, and Ashley betrays Johnny's trust repeatedly while genuinely seeming to care for him in her more lucid moments. Adding to Johnny's personal complications is Jim Fitzgerald, a longtime member of the Lost and Johnny's closest friend. Jim is a stabilizing influence, a voice of reason who supports Johnny's more cautious approach to club business. But Jim is also dealing with his own demons, including a family life that's falling apart and a growing disillusionment with the outlaw lifestyle. Through Jim, we see the human cost of the biker gang existence, the way it consumes everything else in a person's life until nothing remains but the club and the road. As Billy's leadership becomes increasingly erratic and dangerous, the Lost finds itself in escalating conflicts with rival gangs, particularly the Angels of Death, another motorcycle club operating in Liberty City. What begins as typical territorial posturing quickly escalates into open warfare, with drive-by shootings, ambushes, and brutal assaults becoming routine. Billy seems to relish the conflict, seeing it as proof of the Lost's strength and relevance, but Johnny recognizes it as a death spiral that will inevitably end with club members dead or imprisoned. The situation reaches a crisis point when it becomes clear that Billy's recklessness isn't just impulsive, but potentially treasonous. Evidence emerges suggesting that Billy might be cooperating with law enforcement, that his return to the club might be part of a deal to bring down the Lost from within. The revelation forces Johnny to confront an impossible choice. Does he remain loyal to his president and potentially doom the entire club, or does he violate the most sacred rule of outlaw biker culture by moving against a sitting president? The internal politics of the Lost MC are governed by a strict code, a set of rules and traditions that define what it means to be a one-percenter outlaw biker. This code emphasizes loyalty above all else, particularly loyalty to the club and its leadership. To go against a president isn't just rebellion, but a fundamental violation of everything the club stands for. Yet, Johnny increasingly recognizes that Billy's leadership is an existential threat to the Lost's survival. He's caught between two irreconcilable loyalties: loyalty to the club as an institution and loyalty to the brothers whose lives are endangered by that institution's leader. Throughout this period, the Lost continues its various criminal enterprises, and Johnny finds himself working jobs that grow increasingly dangerous and morally questionable. He runs guns for Irish mobsters, deals heroin for Eastern European gangsters, provides muscle for mafia shakedowns, and participates in various acts of violence that weigh on his conscience even as he recognizes them as necessary for the club's survival. Unlike some of the protagonists we've encountered, Johnny seems genuinely troubled by the violence he commits, seeing it as a grim necessity rather than something to be enjoyed or celebrated. The Lost criminal activities also bring them into contact with various other factions operating in Liberty City. They do business with the Triads, negotiate with the Albanian mob, and maintain a wary relationship with the remnants of various Italian crime families. Each of these relationships requires careful management, a diplomatic skill that Johnny possesses but Billy completely lacks. As Billy's behavior becomes more unpredictable, these crucial alliances begin to fray, cutting off revenue streams and creating new enemies. One particularly significant relationship is with Elizabetta Torres, a major drug dealer operating out of Bohan. Elizabetta is connected to numerous criminal enterprises throughout Liberty City, and she serves as a broker for various illegal services. Both Johnny and Niko Bellic work jobs for Elizabetta during this period, sometimes separately, sometimes together. Through Elizabetta, we see how Liberty City's criminal economy functions, with various specialists providing different services and mid-level operators like Elizabetta coordinating between suppliers, distributors, and muscle. But Elizabetta's operation is also falling apart under law enforcement pressure, and her increasing paranoia and drug use make her a dangerous person to be associated with. As spring turns to summer in 2008, the Lost MC's situation deteriorates rapidly. The war with the Angels of Death intensifies, with casualties mounting on both sides. Billy's leadership becomes increasingly divorced from reality, his decisions seemingly designed to maximize chaos rather than advance the club's interests. Ashley's addiction spirals out of control, and her relationship with Johnny becomes even more destructive. Jim grows more distant, clearly contemplating leaving the outlaw life behind, and Johnny finds himself increasingly isolated, bearing the weight of trying to hold together an organization that's tearing itself apart from within. The final crisis comes when Billy's cooperation with law enforcement can no longer be denied. Faced with incontrovertible evidence that their president is an informant, the Lost's remaining loyal members are forced to act. What happens next is both inevitable and tragic, a violent resolution to a conflict that was always going to end in blood. The confrontation with Billy represents not just the removal of a corrupt leader, but the death of whatever idealism might have once animated the Lost MC. The club survives, but in a fundamentally diminished form, its mythology shattered, its brotherhood revealed as conditional and fragile. In the aftermath, Johnny assumes full leadership of what remains of the Lost, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. The club is weakened, its membership depleted, its criminal enterprises disrupted, and its reputation damaged. The war with the Angels of Death continues to simmer, law enforcement attention remains intense, and the various criminal alliances that once provided steady income have been destabilized. Johnny has saved the Lost from immediate destruction, but he hasn't saved it from slow decline. The story of Johnny Klebitz and the Lost MC serves as a counterpoint to Niko Bellic's narrative. Where Niko is an outsider trying to find his place in America, Johnny is an insider watching his place disintegrate. Where Niko's story is about the impossibility of escaping the past, Johnny's story is about the impossibility of preserving the past in the face of inevitable change. Both men are trapped by loyalty, by codes they can't abandon even when those codes lead them toward destruction, and both discover that the things they're fighting for may not be worth the cost. The Lost and Damned also expands our understanding of Liberty City as a living, breathing ecosystem of crime and violence. By showing us the same events from a different perspective, it reveals the complexity of the city's criminal underworld, the way different factions and individuals intersect and influence each other in ways they don't always understand, the diamonds that pass through multiple hands, the bank robbery involving multiple crews, the various criminal brokers connecting different players. All of these elements illustrate that Liberty City's crime isn't a series of isolated incidents, but an interconnected system in which actions ripple outward in unpredictable ways. By the end of 2008, Johnny Klebitz has survived, but survival feels less like victory than like postponement of the inevitable. The Lost MC continues to exist, but its glory days, if they ever truly existed outside of mythology, are clearly behind it. Johnny has proven himself as a leader, but leadership of a dying institution offers little satisfaction. He's lost friends, lost love, and lost whatever illusions he might have once held about the outlaw biker lifestyle. What remains is duty, the obligation to keep riding, keep fighting, keep the club alive for one more day, even when the purpose of that survival has become unclear. The road stretches on ahead, but it no longer leads anywhere Johnny wants to go. While Johnny Klebitz rode through the grimy underbelly of Liberty City on two wheels, another perspective on those same chaotic months of 2008 was unfolding in the city's most exclusive venues. This third and final piece of the Grand Theft Auto 4 puzzle takes us into the glittering world of penthouses, nightclubs, and champagne-soaked VIP lounges, where the stakes are just as high, but the dress code is considerably more expensive. Grand Theft Auto, The Ballad of Gay Tony, released in October 2009 as the second episodic expansion for Grand Theft Auto 4, shifts the focus entirely. Where The Lost and Damned explored the dying breed of outlaw bikers and Niko Bellic's story centered on an immigrant's dark journey through the criminal underworld, The Ballad of Gay Tony examines Liberty City from the top down, from the perspective of those who have already made it or are desperately trying to maintain the illusion that they have. You play as Luis Fernando Lopez, a Dominican-American from Northwood and Algonquin who has climbed his way up from the streets to become the right-hand man and business partner of Anthony "Gay Tony" Prince, Liberty City's most famous nightclub impresario. Luis is not just a bodyguard, though that is certainly part of his job description. He is Tony's problem solver, his enforcer, his voice of reason, and perhaps most importantly, his friend. Their relationship forms the emotional core of this expansion, a genuine bond between two men from vastly different worlds who have found common ground in the pursuit of success and survival in a city that devours the weak. Tony Prince is a legend in Liberty City's nightlife scene. He owns two of the hottest clubs in town, Maisonette 9, an ultra-exclusive establishment in Algonquin, where celebrities, athletes, and the wealthy elite come to be seen, and Hercules, a popular gay nightclub also in Algonquin. Tony's clubs are institutions, the kinds of places that define a city's cultural landscape, but by 2008, the shine has worn off considerably. Tony is drowning in debt, addicted to cocaine, and surrounded by people who either want to exploit him or have already given up on him. His glory days are behind him, and the vultures are circling. This is where Luis comes in. Despite having a 25% stake in both clubs, making him technically a business partner rather than just an employee, Luis spends most of his time cleaning up the messes that Tony's lifestyle creates. The expansion opens with Luis doing exactly that, working the door at Hercules and dealing with the kind of minor crises that come with running a nightclub, from aggressive patrons to drug dealers trying to set up shop on the premises. But Luis's problems extend far beyond unruly customers. Tony's financial troubles stem largely from his business relationship with Maury Kibbutz, a real estate developer and self-help guru who has been bankrolling the clubs. Maury, whom players may remember from Grand Theft Auto 4, where he appeared as a somewhat ridiculous figure obsessed with his own masculinity and self-improvement philosophy, holds significant power over Tony through debt. Maury's mother, Mama Kibbutz, is even more directly involved in the club's finances, and the Kibbutz family's investment comes with strings attached, strings that often require Luis to undertake dangerous and illegal activities to protect their interests. The narrative structure of The Ballad of Gay Tony mirrors that of The Lost and Damned, in that it runs concurrently with the events of Grand Theft Auto 4, offering yet another perspective on the same time period and occasionally intersecting with the stories of both Niko Bellic and Johnny Klebitz. This interconnected storytelling reaches its most sophisticated form in this expansion, with multiple missions showing the same events from Luis's point of view, revealing details and motivations that were hidden in the original game. The most significant of these intersections involves the infamous diamond deal that went wrong, an event that rippled through all three stories. In Grand Theft Auto 4, Niko was hired to work security for a diamond exchange, a deal that was ambushed by a biker gang, which we later learned in The Lost and Damned was Johnny Klebitz and the Lost MC acting on orders from Ray Boccino. What neither story revealed at the time was the full context of those diamonds and why they mattered so much. In the Ballad of Gay Tony, we learn that Luis himself stole those diamonds in the first place. The theft was orchestrated by Tony, who was desperately trying to pay off his debts. The diamonds worth $2 million belonged to a notorious Jewish mob figure named Maury Green, no relation to the kibbutz family. Tony's plan was to steal the diamonds and then broker their return for a finder's fee, a scheme that was risky but seemed like one of the few options available to someone in his financial position. Luis carried out the initial theft during a deal at the Libertonian Museum, a heist that involved rappelling from the ceiling and making a dramatic escape. However, the plan immediately began to fall apart. Tony, in his drug-addled state, made poor decisions about how to handle the diamonds, and they ended up being used as collateral in various deals, passed around Liberty City's criminal underworld like a cursed artifact. The diamonds changed hands multiple times throughout the interconnected stories, and Luis spent much of the expansion trying to recover them, protect Tony from the consequences of losing them, and deal with the various criminals who wanted them for themselves. This pursuit of the diamonds brings Luis into contact with a wide array of Liberty City's criminal element. He deals with Ray Bulgarin, a Russian mobster who claims that Tony owes him money from a failed business deal years earlier involving a ship called the Platypus, the same ship that brought Niko Bellic to Liberty City. Bulgarin is convinced that Tony cheated him and is determined to collect what he believes he is owed, with interest. He becomes one of the expansion's primary antagonists, a ruthless figure who escalates from threats to outright attempts on Tony and Luis's lives. Luis also interacts with Rocco Pelosi, a mobster who works for the Ancelotti crime family. Rocco is another figure trying to exploit Tony's weakness, using the threat of violence and the promise of protection to extract favors and money. He represents the traditional organized crime element that still holds power in Liberty City, even as the city's criminal landscape becomes increasingly diverse and chaotic. Rocco gives Luis various jobs, missions that often put him at odds with other criminal factions and force him to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that define the city's underworld. The expansion also explores Luis's personal life in ways that add depth to his character. Unlike Niko, who was largely alone in Liberty City, or Johnny, whose family was his motorcycle club, Luis has roots in the city. He has a mother, Adriana, who disapproves of his lifestyle and constantly worries about his safety. He has two friends from the neighborhood, Armando Torres and Henrique Bardas, who run a drug-dealing operation and frequently drag Luis into their schemes, despite his attempts to distance himself from street-level crime. The dynamic between Luis and his childhood friends highlights one of the expansion's central themes: the tension between where you come from and where you're trying to go. Luis has achieved a level of success that most people from his neighborhood never reach. He has money, he owns part of 2 successful businesses, and he moves in circles that include celebrities and millionaires. But he has not forgotten where he came from, and he has not abandoned the people who knew him before his success. This loyalty is both his strength and his weakness. Armando and Henrique's criminal activities constantly threaten to pull Luis back down, and his mother's traditional values clash with the lifestyle he has chosen. The missions in the Ballad of Gay Tony are notably more over the top than those in either Grand Theft Auto 4 or The Lost and Damned. While the base game and first expansion maintained a relatively grounded tone, this expansion embraces spectacle and excess. Luis participates in missions that involve base, jumping from skyscrapers, attacking a yacht with an attack helicopter, infiltrating a museum gala, and engaging in shootouts in some of Liberty City's most glamorous locations. The expansion includes a new weapon, the Advanced Personal Defense Weapon or Advanced PDW, and introduces explosive shotgun rounds and sticky bombs that allow for more creative approaches to combat. This tonal shift is intentional and thematically appropriate. The Ballad of Gay Tony is about excess, about the pursuit of luxury and the hollow nature of high society. The missions reflect the world Luis inhabits, a world where everything is amplified, where the highs are higher and the lows are devastating. The expansion satirizes celebrity culture, the nightclub scene, and the shallow pursuits of the wealthy, all while acknowledging the genuine human relationships that exist within that world. One of the expansion's most memorable characters is Yusuf Amir, a young Emirati real estate developer who is absurdly wealthy and even more absurdly enthusiastic. Yusuf is obsessed with American hip-hop culture and luxury goods, and he speaks in a constant stream of profanity-laced excitement about his latest purchases and schemes. He hires Luis for various jobs, including stealing military hardware and engaging in increasingly ridiculous displays of wealth and power. Yusuf is both a parody of nouveau riche excess and a surprisingly likable character, his genuine enthusiasm and loyalty to Luis making him more than just a one-note joke. Through Yusuf, the expansion explores themes of authenticity and performance. In Liberty City's high society, everyone is performing a role, projecting an image of success and confidence regardless of the reality beneath. Tony performs the role of the successful club owner even as his empire crumbles. The celebrities who frequent Maisonette 9 perform their fame. Yusuf performs his vision of American success. And Luis, in many ways, performs the role of the loyal bodyguard and friend, even as he questions whether this life is what he truly wants. The expansion also features several celebrity cameos and parodies, including appearances by characters clearly based on real-world figures from sports and entertainment. These encounters are played for satire, highlighting the absurdity of celebrity culture and the way that fame distorts human behavior. Luis often finds himself babysitting or protecting these figures, dealing with their inflated egos and self-destructive tendencies, all while trying to keep Tony's businesses running. As the story progresses, the situation becomes increasingly desperate. Bulgarin escalates his campaign against Tony, eventually attacking Maisonette 9 directly in a mission that forces Luis to defend the club against waves of armed attackers. The diamonds continue to circulate through Liberty City's underworld, and Luis's attempts to recover them lead to confrontations with various criminal factions, including another intersection with Niko Bellic's story during a three-way Mexican standoff in an old warehouse. The relationship between Luis and Tony is tested repeatedly throughout the expansion. Tony's drug use and poor decision-making create constant crises that Luis must resolve. There are moments when Luis considers walking away, when the loyalty he feels is strained to its breaking point. But he always comes back, always finds a way to protect his friend and business partner. This loyalty is not blind or unexamined. Luis is fully aware of Tony's flaws and the ways that their relationship is sometimes one-sided. But he also sees the person beneath the addiction and the desperation, the friend who gave him opportunities when others would not have. The climax of The Ballad of Gay Tony involves a final confrontation with Bulgarin, who has become obsessed with destroying Tony and taking everything he has. The mission takes place at the Platypus, the cargo ship that has appeared throughout the Grand Theft Auto 4 saga, bringing the story full circle to where Niko's journey began. Luis must fight his way through Bulgarin's men and ultimately face the Russian mobster himself in a battle that determines whether Tony will survive and whether their businesses can be saved. In the aftermath, with Bulgarin dead and the immediate threats neutralized, Luis and Tony are left to rebuild. The club survive, though the financial situation remains precarious. More importantly, their friendship survives, tested by fire but ultimately proven genuine. The expansion ends on a note of cautious optimism, suggesting that while Liberty City will always be a dangerous place and success will always be fragile, the bonds between people can endure if they are strong enough. The Ballad of Gay Tony represents the final piece of the Grand Theft Auto 4 trilogy, completing a narrative experiment that showed the same city and time period from three radically different perspectives. Together, the three stories create a rich, layered portrait of Liberty City in 2008, a city of immigrants and natives, bikers and club owners, killers and dreamers, all trying to survive and perhaps find something worth living for in the chaos. 4 years after the chaotic nights of Liberty City's club scene, the story shifts west once more. By 2013, Los Santos has transformed into a sprawling metropolis that mirrors the excesses and contradictions of modern America. This is where Grand Theft Auto 5 unfolds, marking a revolutionary departure from previous entries in the series by following not one, but three distinct protagonists whose lives become inextricably linked through ambition, desperation, and violence. The first of these characters is Michael D. Santa, though that is not the name he was born with. Michael is a retired bank robber living in witness protection after faking his death years earlier in a botched heist in North Yankton, a fictional Midwestern state. He now resides in a mansion in Rockford Hills, one of Los Santos' most affluent neighborhoods, attempting to live the American dream he spent decades stealing for. But retirement has not brought Michael peace. His marriage to Amanda is crumbling under the weight of mutual resentment and infidelity. His children, Tracy and Jimmy, are products of excessive privilege with no direction or respect for their father. Michael spends his days drinking by the pool, seeing a therapist named Dr. Isaiah Friedlander, and wrestling with the gnawing emptiness that comes from achieving everything he thought he wanted, only to discover it means nothing. The second protagonist is Franklin Clinton, a young man from South Los Santos trying to escape the gravitational pull of gang life. Franklin grew up in the rough neighborhoods of Strawberry and Chamberlain Hills, raised by his aunt Denise after his mother's death. He is affiliated with the Families, one of the street gangs that have controlled parts of Los Santos for decades, but Franklin sees the dead ends that lifestyle offers. He works as a repo man for a corrupt Armenian luxury car dealership, repossessing vehicles from people who cannot afford the predatory loans they were sold. Franklin is ambitious and intelligent, hungry for something more than the limited options his neighborhood seems to offer, but he lacks the connections and opportunities to break free from the cycle. The third protagonist is Trevor Phillips, a force of pure chaos and violence. Trevor is a career criminal, a former military pilot, and Michael's old partner in crime who believes Michael died in that North Yankton heist 9 years ago. Trevor now lives in a trailer in Sandy Shores, a desolate town in Blaine County, the rural area surrounding Los Santos. He runs a small criminal enterprise called Trevor Phillips Enterprises, dealing in guns, drugs, and anything else that turns a profit. Trevor is a methamphetamine user and manufacturer, prone to explosive rages and acts of shocking brutality. He is also fiercely loyal to those he considers friends and possesses a strange code of ethics that makes sense only to him. His volatility makes him both terrifying and oddly sympathetic, a man whose mental instability is both his greatest weapon and his deepest vulnerability. These three lives collide when Franklin, on a repossession job, attempts to steal a car from Michael's son Jimmy. Michael catches Franklin in the act, but instead of calling the police, he sees something of his younger self in Franklin's ambition and competence. Michael tracks down the dealership that sent Franklin and, in an act of cathartic violence, pulls down the entire building's facade with a truck. This impulsive act of destruction has consequences. The house Michael destroys actually belongs to the mistress of Martin Madrazo, a powerful Mexican drug lord. To pay off the debt, Michael is forced back into the criminal life he thought he had left behind. He brings Franklin along, seeing potential in the younger man and perhaps seeking to mentor someone the way he wishes he had been guided. Their first job together is robbing a jewelry store on Vangelico Plaza. The heist requires planning, crew selection, and choosing between different approaches, introducing players to the game's heist mechanics. These elaborate multi-stage missions represent the pinnacle of the series' mission design, allowing players to scout locations, acquire equipment, select crew members with varying skills and cut percentages, and choose between loud aggressive approaches or more subtle stealthy methods. The jewelry store robbery is successful, netting Michael and Franklin a significant payday, but it has an unintended consequence. The heist is spectacular enough to make the news, and watching the coverage in his trailer in Sandy Shores, Trevor recognizes Michael's signature style. The man he thought was dead is alive and has been living in luxury while Trevor believed he was mourning his best friend. Trevor's arrival in Los Santos is a powder keg entering a room full of sparks. He confronts Michael, and the truth emerges. That botched heist in North Yankton was not entirely an accident. Michael had cut a deal with FIB agent Dave Norton, agreeing to provide information and enter witness protection in exchange for immunity. Their third partner, Brad Snyder, was supposed to be arrested, but he was killed instead, and his body was buried in the grave that was supposed to contain Michael's corpse. Trevor is devastated by the betrayal, but also cannot entirely let go of his connection to Michael. Their relationship is toxic and codependent, built on years of shared violence and a bond that neither can fully break. With Trevor in the picture, the stakes escalate dramatically. The three protagonists begin working together, though the alliance is fraught with tension. Michael and Trevor's history is complicated, filled with both genuine affection and deep resentment. Franklin finds himself caught between them, the outsider trying to navigate the dysfunction of his new partners while pursuing his own goals of financial security and respect. The game's structure allows players to switch between the three characters at will, experiencing Los Santos and Blaine County from three distinct perspectives. When not on missions, each character continues living their life. Michael might be arguing with his family or watching classic films. Franklin could be hanging out with his friend Lamar Davis, whose loyalty to gang life creates friction between them. Trevor might be engaged in any number of disturbing activities in Blaine County, from running guns to terrorizing the local Lost Motorcycle Club chapter. The narrative satirizes virtually every aspect of contemporary American culture. Los Santos is a city obsessed with fame, where Tracy DeSanta auditions for a reality show called Fame or Shame, and where the Vinewood film industry churns out mindless action movies and pretentious art films with equal cynicism. The game skewers social media through platforms like Life Invader, a transparent parody of Facebook, and explores how technology has made everyone simultaneously more connected and more isolated. Political discourse is reduced to absurd extremes, with talk radio hosts spouting increasingly unhinged conspiracy theories, while politicians are uniformly corrupt and self-serving. The pursuit of wealth is revealed as hollow, with Michael's misery in his mansion serving as a constant reminder that money cannot buy happiness or meaning. As the three protagonists pull off increasingly ambitious scores, they attract the attention of powerful forces. The FIB, the game's version of the FBI, coerces them into working as off-the-books operatives. Agents Dave Norton and Steve Haynes use Michael, Franklin, and Trevor to do their dirty work, sending them on missions that serve the agents' career ambitions rather than any legitimate law enforcement purpose. The crew raids a lab to steal a neurotoxin, infiltrates a federal building to delete incriminating files, and even breaks into a facility to extract a target under the guise of an alien abduction. These missions highlight the corruption at every level of government and law enforcement, where the supposed guardians of order are often more criminal than the criminals they claim to pursue. The heists grow more elaborate. The crew robs a rural bank in Paleto Bay, engaging in a massive shootout with the police while wearing heavy armor. They hijack a military convoy to steal experimental technology. The pinnacle is the Union Depository heist, an incredibly complex operation targeting the largest bank in Los Santos. This final major score requires extensive preparation, careful crew selection, and flawless execution. Players must decide between different approaches, each with its own challenges and potential payoffs. The heist itself is a masterclass in tension and spectacle, bringing together everything the game has taught about planning and executing criminal operations. But as the money piles up, the personal costs become impossible to ignore. Michael's family falls apart completely. Amanda leaves him, taking the children, and Michael spirals into depression and self-destructive behavior. His sessions with Dr. Friedlander become increasingly desperate. though the therapist is revealed to be more interested in exploiting Michael's story for a book deal than actually helping him. Franklin's friendship with Lamar is strained by their diverging paths, with Lamar's continued involvement in gang activity putting him in constant danger that Franklin must help him escape. Trevor's instability reaches new heights as his past catches up with him, including confrontations with the Triads, a powerful Chinese criminal organization, and revelations about his time in the military that suggest he was discharged for psychological reasons. The game explores themes of family and loyalty through these fractured relationships. Michael's biological family is a disaster, but he finds a strange surrogate family in Franklin, and despite everything, Trevor. Franklin is searching for father figures and role models, finding them in Michael's experience and, even in a twisted way, in Trevor's absolute authenticity. Trevor's loyalty, though expressed through violence and madness, is perhaps the most genuine emotion any of the characters display. He is incapable of the kind of calculated betrayal that Michael committed, even as his actions cause chaos for everyone around him. Betrayal is a constant presence in the narrative. Michael betrayed Trevor and Brad years ago. Agent Norton betrays Michael by continuing to use him even after their original deal should have ended. Steve Haynes betrays everyone in his pursuit of fame and career advancement. Devin Weston, a billionaire venture capitalist who becomes one of the crew's employers, betrays them by refusing to pay for jobs and eventually putting out hits on Michael and his family. The game presents betrayal as almost inevitable in a world where everyone is pursuing their own self-interest, and where loyalty is seen as a weakness to be exploited. The consequences of a life of crime are examined from multiple angles. Michael has all the money he could want but is profoundly unhappy, his relationships destroyed and his sense of purpose lost. Trevor is free in a way that Michael is not, unburdened by pretense or social expectations, but his freedom is indistinguishable from madness and isolation. Franklin is just beginning his criminal career and still believes that enough money will solve his problems, though he is surrounded by evidence that this is not true. The game does not moralize in a heavy-handed way, but it presents a clear picture of how violence and crime corrode the soul and poison relationships. As the story approaches its climax, the three protagonists face a moment of reckoning. Steve Haynes orders Trevor killed because he has become too much of a liability. Devin Weston orders Michael killed in retaliation for various slights and because Michael's protege Franklin stole cars from him and then refused to kill Michael when ordered. Franklin is caught in the middle, given the choice of who to kill or whether to refuse both orders and try to save everyone. This choice leads to three different endings, each exploring different possibilities. In one ending, Franklin kills Trevor, ambushing him in the oil fields and watching as his truck explodes. In another, Franklin kills Michael, chasing him to the top of a smokestack where Michael falls to his death. These endings are bleak, showing the ultimate consequence of a life where everyone is expendable and loyalty crumbles under pressure. But there is a third option. Franklin can refuse to choose, calling both Michael and Trevor and proposing they stand together against everyone who wants them dead. This leads to a final mission where the three protagonists systematically eliminate all their enemies, killing Haynes, Weston, and everyone else who threatened them. The crew survives, battered but intact, having chosen loyalty over self-preservation. Grand Theft Auto V ultimately presents a dark mirror to American society, examining the myths of success and the reality of moral compromise. Los Santos is a city where everyone is hustling, everyone is performing, and everyone is miserable beneath the surface. The three protagonists are not heroes. They are murderers, thieves, and deeply flawed individuals. But in their struggle to survive and find meaning in a meaningless world, they become strangely human. The game asks what we are willing to sacrifice in pursuit of wealth, and whether the American dream is worth the cost of achieving it. By 2013, in the world of Grand Theft Auto, the answer seems increasingly unclear. And so, from the gritty streets of 1961 London where it all began, through the cocaine-fueled chaos of Vice City in the 1980s, the gang warfare that consumed San Andreas in the early 90s, the Eastern European immigrant struggle in Liberty City's 2008, and finally to the sun-soaked cynicism of Los Santos in 2013, the Grand Theft Auto universe has chronicled nearly 6 decades of American crime, ambition, and the eternal pursuit of that elusive dream that always seems just one more score away. What started as a simple top-down crime simulator in 1997 evolved into one of gaming's most ambitious and culturally significant franchises, building a shared universe where radio DJs cross between cities, corporations rise and fall across decades, and the same families, gangs, and criminal organizations weave through multiple generations. Each era brought its own flavor of criminality, from the organized mob structures of the 60s and 70s to the drug empires of the 80s, the street gang warfare of the 90s, the immigrant underworld of the 2000s, and the late-stage capitalist chaos of the 2010s. Yet, the core remained constant. Ordinary people, often immigrants or outsiders, clawing their way up through a system designed to keep them down, using violence and cunning as their only real currency in cities that promise everything and deliver mostly bullets. The timeline shows us that while technology advanced, cities grew, and the specific crimes evolved with the times, the fundamental nature of the criminal underworld remained remarkably consistent. A shadow economy running parallel to legitimate society, sometimes intersecting with it, sometimes indistinguishable from it, always feeding off the same human desires for wealth, power, respect, and survival. Liberty City transformed from a gritty 70s mob town to a post 9/11 surveillance state, yet the same criminal impulses drove both eras. Vice City's neon-soaked beaches witnessed the birth of the modern drug trade that would echo through every subsequent decade. San Andreas showed us how street-level gang warfare could be just as complex and far-reaching as any organized crime family, while also revealing the deep government corruption that enabled and often directed criminal enterprises for its own ends. The connections between games, sometimes subtle and sometimes explicit, created a living world where actions had consequences that rippled across time and space, where a radio commercial in Vice City referenced events from Liberty City, where characters from one era became legends or cautionary tales in another, where the same weapons dealers, corrupt politicians, and criminal enterprises operated across multiple decades and cities, adapting to changing times but never really changing their fundamental nature. We saw how the American dream, that central mythology that draws people from around the world, became twisted in the criminal underworld into something darker, a dream that required stepping over bodies and betraying friends. A dream that even when achieved often felt hollow, leaving its achievers isolated, paranoid, and empty. Claude remained silent through his revenge. Tommy built an empire but stood alone at the top. CJ saved his family but lost his brother. Vic died for his troubles. Niko discovered his revenge meant nothing. And Michael, Trevor, and Franklin found that even a successful heist couldn't fill the voids in their lives. The cities themselves became characters, each one a meticulously crafted satire of American urban life. From Liberty City's cynical take on New York's melting pot of corruption and ambition, to Vice City's pastel-colored critique of 80s excess and the cocaine cowboys who defined an era, to San Andreas' sprawling examination of West Coast gang culture, corrupt government agencies, and the entertainment industry's dark underbelly, and finally back to a modern Liberty City drowning in post-recession anxiety and a lost Santos that perfected the franchise's satirical edge, skewering social media culture, celebrity worship, government surveillance, corporate greed, and the hollowness at the heart of contemporary American life. The radio stations, those constant companions through countless hours of driving, provided not just period-appropriate soundtracks, but also world-building through their commercials, news reports, and DJ banter, creating a media landscape that felt alive and reactive, commenting on the players' actions and the state of the world, adding layers of satire and social commentary that elevated the games beyond simple crime simulators into genuine cultural critiques. The evolution of gameplay from the top-down chaos of the original games to the cinematic third-person epics of the three-dimensional era mirrored the evolution of gaming itself, with each installment pushing technical boundaries and expanding what was possible in an open-world game, but never losing sight of the core appeal. The freedom to exist in a fully realized criminal underworld, to make choices, to cause chaos, to follow missions, or simply explore, to engage with the world on your own terms. The controversy that followed the franchise, the moral panics about violence and crime simulation, became part of its legend. Yet the games themselves often presented crime not as glamorous but as desperate, brutal, and ultimately self-destructive, showing us criminals who were products of their environments shaped by poverty, trauma, limited opportunities, and systemic failures. Not monsters, but humans making terrible choices in difficult circumstances, which made them more compelling and more troubling than simple villains would have been. The supporting cast across all games created a rogues gallery of memorable characters, from the unhinged to the philosophical, from small-time hustlers to criminal masterminds, from corrupt cops to idealistic revolutionaries turned cynical survivors, each one adding depth and texture to their respective eras and